Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the MHA What If with another fanfiction. This is the first part of What If Deku Found the Sakura book? All credits for this video go to their respective authors, so please support the real author. Check out the link in the description for more details. Please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. It was dark, but the moon was full and bright, casting everything around him in a silvery glow. The city he was standing over was flooded with lights, shining and blinking, unnoticed by the boy now standing atop the roof of the tallest building around. The stream? In the distance, Tokyo Tower stood. Its bright red and white metal beams stood out against the black backdrop that is the night sky. The stars were twinkling, but in the presence of the moon and the city they were washed out. Where? A roof. From above it rained cards. The tall, pink-backed cards fell down everywhere that he could see, an endless supply raining down from the cloudless night sky. To his right floated an animal unlike any other he'd seen before. A golden coat with white wings that didn't move as it hovered by his shoulder, a tail swishing back and forth as the two waited. What am I wearing? What am I holding? It was time. Gripping the green staff adorned with a star, he fell. The air whipped past his ears, his cape and skirt billowed outward as his shoes gained wings along the ankle. He was closer to the ground now, near enough that he could make out the individual bricks of the sidewalk. Why did I jump? What was that animal? What? Izuku groaned as his head hit the unforgiving floor, the incessant beeping of his alarm exacerbating his blossoming headache. Blinking back the beginnings of tears, the green-haired boy kneeled as he slammed his alarm silencer, finally letting the boy have some quiet. That dream again. Izuku was gently taken from his thoughts when his mother's voice came from the hall. Izuku? Are you okay there? Yeah, Mom, I'm good. Wincing as his joints popped, he got up from the floor before sitting on his bed. That dream that's the third time I've had it in 2 weeks, he thought to himself. Izuku, you're going to be late if you don't hurry up. His mother's voice rang clearly through the air from the kitchen, the smell of omurice following closely behind. Not wanting to gain his mother's ire, Izuku began the long and arduous process that is getting ready for middle school. Midoriya Izuku, a third year at Urudara Middle School. He's fairly normal with his plain-looking face covered in freckles, as well as his unruly green bush of hair just add to his normal appearance. In every way he is average physically, not the best in PE, but not the worst either, and his body reflects that with its thin layer of baby fat over his lean muscle. The most not normal thing about him is that he isn't quirky. Literally. In the world that he lives in, 80% of the population around the world has a superpower called a quirk. These range from having gills to conjuring invisible strands of sticky, stretchy substances. If you can think of a quirk, someone out in the world has it. Everyone except Izuku. Well, mostly everyone. Somehow, despite having fourth-generation quirk users as parents, Midoriya Izuku was born as one of the 20% in the world that are deemed quirkless. He can't use his mother's minor telekinesis on his shoes, he can't breathe fire like his father could, nor can he fly or conjure constructs of light. Midoriya Izuku is like 1/5 of the population, and yet he's a freak. As he says goodbye to his mother, leaving for school, he thinks about his life so far in quirked society. Up until he was 4 years old, everything was going great. He had a best friend, the teachers loved him, and other parents allowed him to play with their kids. But when that fateful doctor's visit happened, confirming that he won't ever gain a quirk, everything changed. His best friend of 4 years became his worst enemy, using his quirk explosion to injure him while his peers cheered him on or even joined in. Now his teachers are indifferent. Whether he gets full marks or 0, he's ignored. The parents at the nearby park know him and force their kids away whenever he arrives, not wanting their children to catch quirklessness. It SCKS, but that's life for the minority. Now, the 20% statistic might have people believe that 1 out of every 5 people is quirkless, but that is a lie propagated by the world government. The reality of the situation is that fewer quirkless people are being born yearly. The census put out last year revealed only 5% of the world's children in the range of newborn to 4-year-olds. Even with the bleak statistics, Izuku wanted to make it in the world. With quirks came superheroes, better known as pro-heroes. Izuku, even with the discriminatory backlash he receives for not having a quirk, plans on becoming a hero and saving anyone that he can. It was the first day back after fall break, meaning that they would be doing future evaluations. The school counselors would do their best at dissuading him from his dream, but Izuku had a plan to make it a reality. Since elementary, heroes have dominated everything about Izuku's life. Coupled with the dream to be a hero, Izuku trained, going on runs, lifting weights in the apartment, following an online diet plan, and even community service in the form of cleaning a trash-filled beach 2 kilometers from his apartment complex every other day. Of course, that training doesn't matter when you're assaulted by a classmate's quirk nearly every day. An explosion to the face can freak anyone out, causing them to fall over and flinch. Like he is doing right now. Stupid FN Deku. Enter one Bakugo Katsuki, Izuku's most dangerous bully, and the most hero-worthy student, at Arudara. You know better than to try and walk in front of me. It's ironic how the most hero-worthy of students acts the most like an actual villain, according to law, and the most useless one acts the most like a hero. What are you smiling about, shitty Deku? Oh, he's still there. You gonna fight back? Of course not. The moment I even try to fight, I'm sent to the office and then suspended. It was true. Quirkless, in a society built on quirks, meant discrimination from everyone. Heck, not even Inko, his mother, is immune. Her colleagues at the hospital make remarks about Izuku whenever she's around. Eventually, Bakugo got it through his head that Izuku's continued existence isn't a personal slight against him and left. Picking himself up, Izuku sighed as he checked to make sure his hearing wasn't permanently damaged. Thankfully it wasn't, meaning he could get on with his day relatively fine. The first class of the day was homeroom, and since this week was future planning week, it would start off as informatics on what we might want to be, which high schools would be the best to attain the job you wanted, and what colleges to try for. So, when Matsuyama-sensei enters the classroom, almost immediately everyone stops talking in order to begin the instructions. I should be passing out these forms for you to fill out, telling us teachers what you want to be in the future. Sensei is holding a stack of the forms that Izuku can't wait to get his hands on. Maybe this year the counselors won't put him down for no reason. But I know you all just want to be heroes. The stack goes flying, and with it all of Izuku's remaining respect for Matsuyama-sensei. Rather than actually do the required lecture for their year, he just assumed they all want to be heroes. In the back corner, Izuku can hear Kataoka-kun, Obi-kun, and Mukai-chan all discussing the fact they want to be archaeologists, and the Miyahara twins are loudly talking about trying to reignite space transversing technologies. Heck, Matsuoka-kun's little posse, the ones with the most obvious mutant quirks, about 3 of them are talking about how they'd rather go into construction or physical LBR. Too bad Matsuyama-sensei can't hear them because of all the quirk usage in the background, but still, 8 out of 20, nearly half the class doesn't want to be a hero, and here their teacher was just spitting in their faces. You guys know you're not supposed to use your quirks in class. Sensei's attempt at quieting the students is pathetic at best. Only 7 are even using them, while the rest of the 5 other hero hopefuls give glares. Izuku just puts his head down, ready for English class to begin. An explosion sounds, bringing everyone's attention to the ashen blonde sitting right in front of Izuku. Hey teach. God, can he just shut up? Don't lump me together with these extras. I'm going to UA to become the #1 hero. The effect that big-headed Bakugo wanted is achieved. The class breaks out into murmurs about UA being extremely competitive, their entrance rate is extremely low, and why would Bakugo let his future ride on something like that? Shut it. I aced the mock exams they put out every time. You all can complain, but you're just stepping stones in my path to greatness. Man, he needs a reality check. Being a hero isn't just about winning, it's about saving the civilians first. It's quite literally the first lesson in foundational heroics for first years at any hero school. Izuku, ears still ringing slightly from the proximity of the explosion that Bakugo should be sent to the office for, just barely hears Matsuyama-sensei's next words, but he wishes he didn't. Oh yeah, Midoriya-kun, you also wanted to go to UA, right? Knowing what came next, The quirkless teen immediately grabs his bag, plants his feet, and pushes his chair as far away from his desk as possible, turning his head to mitigate the damage to his face. In that next split second, an explosion the size of his head detonates right where his head would have been had he not moved. Deku, are you kidding me? Bakugo growls, his need to make everything about himself showing. I've been training to get into UA, I have just as much a chance as any. The green-haired teen trails off, hearing his classmates jeer at him. Seriously, Deku? You're quirkless. You wouldn't even make it past the front gate. Like they would ever accept you into the hero course. You should just give up before you hurt yourself, Deku. I don't think anyone would want a Deku saving them ever. He tried to ignore them. He's heard it all before, and it's not like they're original. They repealed the quirkless bar for the hero course 7 years ago. There's no harm in trying. Unfortunately, that was the wrong thing to say, if Bakugo's heated glare was anything to say about it. Deku, if you even think that you can even be on the same stage as me, then you've got another thing coming. The explosive blonde was just about to detonate another explosion at the quirkless teen before Matsuyama-sensei spoke up for once. Now, Bakugo, you know the rules. No using your quirks in school. The silent, but outside I don't care, was heard by everyone in the room. Eventually, the class got settled once again, but the tension never left Bakugo's shoulders. How they haven't collapsed from holding up his ego and all that tension, Izuku will never know, and he likely never will, because at the moment the final bell rang, the violent blonde snagged Izuku's bag and set off an explosion at his chest. Deku. Wow, he sounds like a broken record. Maybe someone should send him to therapy and get that fixed? Don't even try for UA. All the top heroes have stories of how they were great, even in middle school. If I want my story to be perfect, I can't have a worthless Deku like you messing it up. Izuku doesn't respond. He's sitting in his chair, watching as Bakugo does the same old song and dance. You're just a pebble on my way to greatness, Deku. It looks like he might end the session with just a few explosions, but then Moriaka-kun, one of Bakugo's friends, points to the cover of a notebook in Izuku's bag. Hero analysis for the future? You can't become a hero just by studying, Deku. A person like you, a quirkless freak, hasn't got a chance. Bakugo sneers at his friend's voice, but pulls out the offending notebook, dropping the bag and letting its contents spill onto the floor. It seems like you really haven't given up, huh, Deku? Holding the notebook between his palms, Bakugo gets a vicious smirk on his face, some might even call it villainous. How about I give you a little nudge, remove the false hope you still have? Knowing what is coming, and not wanting all of the precious data he's compiled to be wasted, Izuku tries to reach out and take the notebook back before a tragedy happens. Of course, he's too late and the explosive blast pushes him back a full meter, the ashes of the book falling to the floor. Finally done, Bakugo and his lackeys leave the room, but not before the blonde stops in the doorway, another sneer on his face. Hey, you still want a quirk, right? It's rhetorical, but the answer is still a no. Well, I've got a time-saving idea for you. Bakugo pauses, looking right at Izuku when he says, if you want a quirk so badly, just take a swan dive off the roof. Pray you get a quirk in the next life. He laughs patronizingly, his lackeys laughing with him as they slam the classroom door closed, leaving their green-haired target to continue standing there, watching the door in disbelief. If you want a quirk so badly, just take a swan dive off the roof. The blonde tormentor's words echo in his head as he packs his notebook, ashes flaking off every now and then into his bag, straightening out the contents. Putting the incident behind him, Izuku leaves the school, walking aimlessly as his thoughts run wild. You're actually more stupid than I thought you were, Bakugo. If I were to actually follow through on your advice, then you would be blacklisted from every hero school in the country and sent to a villain rehabilitation center for at least a year. Also, the school would shut down within the month due to everyone participating in the harassment, bullying, and quirk assault. The short teen shook his head, looking up from the path that he'd been following since he'd left the school building. Is this even the way home? Izuku shrugged, continued on his way, passing little shops that give off a homey-type feel. He's never actually been on this street before, but it doesn't really matter so long as he gets home before 8. As he reads the sign of one Okumura's coffee and cats, his phone buzzes. Pulling it out reveals that it's an All Might alert. The number 1 hero has been spotted at the intersection of 23rd Street and Sunrise Boulevard. That's along my normal path home. He continues to read the article. Today, Mizudafu has been graced with the presence of the number 1 hero All Might. This morning he was seen bounding across the city, and when he heard the cries from a villain attack, he jumped into action. Chasing the now-identified villain Sugawara Rokuro after he robbed Shiba and Endo jewelers, All Might eventually caught him after a 20-minute chase in the Mizudafu sewer system. As of now, All Might has not taken any calls, and after the police took his statement of the incident, he leaped away. Any further information on why the symbol of peace was in Mizudafu in the first place is nothing but speculation, but the most prominent theories are either he is 1 visiting his old sidekick, Sir Night Eye, or 2 going to drop in on UA's Hero Corps students for an impromptu lecture. Izuku was stunned. If he had happened to follow his normal route home, he might have gotten to see All Might in action. Maybe he could have gotten All Might to sign his notebook. The green-haired teen was so giddy with the news that he didn't see the person in front of him. The collision between the unknown stranger and Izuku sent the middle schooler sprawling to the side, hitting a storefront's door in his attempt to not fall. "I'm so sorry." Green Eyes tried to find the person he'd run into, but they already left. "Guess they were in a hurry," he mused, looking around. Pulling himself up from his heavy leaning against the door, Izuku looked at the sign. Inomoto Hoshi's reading nook. Seeing as he was already there, he might as well go in, and maybe they have better books about physical fitness than the library. The door chimed as he entered the little shop, allowing him to see the warm ambience of the store. Lining the walls were shelves, each one stocked full of books, reaching the ceiling. Making small rows, shelves that were just barely taller than Izuku himself covered the main floor of the store, leaving a reading area in the center. Following the topics, Izuku made his way through the rows until he made it to the outer edge. 7 rows of physical health books greeted him, and he made quick work of trying to find one that would improve upon his training habits. He scanned 3 rows when something heavy hits Izuku on the back. Thinking it's a person that he bumped into, he turns around. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to dash." He cuts himself off. There was no one behind him. "Strange that I'm sure I hit something," he thought, looking around. In his sweep of the row with his eyes, Izuku saw a flash of pink on the otherwise red carpet. Looking down, he saw a book. In bright contrast, the book was pink with golden accents. Bending down, he picked it up, then looked to the shelf along the wall. It must have fallen out after someone put it away, not securing its place, he mused. Looking at its front, the first thing that caught his eye was the chained sun sitting before a winged, golden lion with silver armor. The next big thing was how, instead of a title, the name Sakura was printed on a banner at the top, sitting above a 10-pointed star with wings. While it's not the strangest book to be made in the Quirk era, it still is pretty weird, especially in the physical health section of a bookstore. Turning it around revealed that it had a locked clasp, the wing lock connected to a pink strap that was secured in place by a metal buckle on the back. "This looks like it should belong in the journal section," he thought, continuing his look over of the book as he walked to the appropriate section. As he walked, his eyes traced over the intricate pattern of what looked like a magic circle. In the center of a 12-pointed star sat the 10-pointed golden and pink star. On the left sat a waning crescent moon, and on the right was a sun. At the cardinal directions, like a compass, were the kanji for north, east, south, and west. Between the outer, compass-like ring and the 12-pointed star, sat the symbols of the Occidental zodiac. Beneath all of that sat an upward-facing golden crescent with wings, a banner with Sakura printed beneath it. It was a cool-looking book, and while Izuku might have wanted to buy it just for the aesthetic of the sun, moon, and stars, he didn't need it. Also, while he doesn't mind pink at all, he knows his classmates will find some way to make fun of him. Rather than take that risk, Izuku finally makes it to the journal section, setting the Sakura journal back on the shelf. Time passes and the book is gone from his mind. Preoccupied with finding a proper fitness guidebook, Izuku's green eyes trailed over countless spines. Dr. Nakai Kin's Guide to Strengthening Your Quirk? No, he doesn't have a quirk. Hasegawa Tetsuo's Quirk Training Guide. Again, no Quirk. Dejected, Izuku let out a long-suffering sigh, tired of reading all the titles of Quirk training guides when he doesn't have one. Ready to be done with all the reminders of this morning, Izuku hoists his bag up and turns to the door, but not before something bright catches his eye. There, on the shelf that he'd placed the Sakura journal, was what looked like a glowing bar sitting between the books. Curious as ever, the quirkless boy got closer. With each step the glowing subsided a bit more until he was grabbing the spine, pulling out the Sakura book? What made it glow? The teen wondered, looking around for other patrons of the bookstore. Did someone use a quirk on it? Is this a selling technique this store uses? Maybe the book was printed using quirk-affected objects, giving it the latent power to glow? Either way, this book glows and that's cool. Mind made, Izuku decided he'd buy it, not really caring for the consequences at this point. It glows. That's really all the reason he needs in his quest to record quirks and their effects. As he walked to the register next to the door, Izuku couldn't help but think of the clasp. It's locked, but there doesn't seem to be an attached key. Maybe the store separates them so no one can steal it without damaging the intricate design? He shrugged, figuring he'd find out sooner or later, now that he's ready to pay. Hello, the employee Inomoto, her tag red greeted. Find anything you liked? Izuku gave a small, shy smile. It was always hit and miss with who knew he was quirkless in Lower Mizudafu. Why, yeah, I did, he said, nodding and placed the journal on the counter. I was wondering, the key for this journal, does it come separate, or is it not really locked? Oh, this old thing? Inomoto-san said, picking up the book. She turned it over and then placed it back on the counter between them. This is actually from my father's collection that I have here in the store. Oh, I can put it back dash. No, they're meant to be sold. He was a bit of a hoarder back in his day, so I'm glad that others find his books to be enjoyable. She hummed, looking back at the book. As for a key, it's not really locked, just a magnet here, try it. Complying, Izuku grabbed the clasp, and as Inomoto-san said, it came undone easily. Oh, you're right. He closed the clasp again, feeling embarrassed at the mistake he made. Inomoto-san smiled. Of course. Now, for this book, I'll have to charge you 500 yen. Deal? Izuku nodded and handed over the yen note. Completing the purchase, the green teen made his way out of the shop, using his phone to navigate the unfamiliar streets. About 2 blocks from his apartment complex, a noise came from his bag. Startled, the boy stopped, grabbed the offending object, and peered inside. Without warning, a golden plush lion with white wings and beady eyes burst from the bag. Well, hey! It shouted, scaring Izuku so badly he yelped, tripped over his own feet and fell to the ground. Now that's just rude, you know? I'm dead. This isn't real. This is a hallucination brought on from being in a coma. Bakugo went too far and now I'm in a hospital. Maybe a random villain has a hallucination-making quirk. This isn't real. Izuku mumbled to himself all the different ways that the plush couldn't be talking, his speculations becoming more outrageous by the second and faster too. Whoa, the plush said, raising its arms in a placating manner. Slow down there, Midori. It knows half my name. Izuku squeaked, scampering backward a few centimeters. Dude, stop. The flying lion plush sweat dropped at his reaction. My name is Caraberos, and I am the beast of the seal, he Caraberos stated proudly, if the paw on his chest said anything. Finally getting his erratic breathing under some semblance of control, Izuku got up on shaky legs. Okay, Kero.Barrows? Caraberos' eyes gleamed at his name being called. What were you doing in my bag? Is this a prank? Am I on Quirkified? The green boy looked around for any hidden cameras, but when he found none he looked back at Caraberos. What Quirkified? No, you're not being pranked. As for why I was in your bag, he said before being enveloped in a golden glow. From the fallen bag, the Sakura book that Izuku just bought for 500 yen floated out, also glowing gold. You're the one that opened the seal, allowing me to be returned to the material world. He sounded so happy when he said that, and it just made Izuku all the more confused. Okay, but anyone could have opened the book? It was a weak magnet, the boy said. Then, as an afterthought, is there anything I can call you besides Caraberos? It's a bit long. Also, how do you have both an Osaka and Tokyo accent? And how are you flying? You're not moving your wings. And where did that light come from? There is so much wrong with what you just said, Caraberos sighed. For now, just call me Kero. Sakura did, anyway, and the accent thing is complicated. As for the weak magnet, as you put it, it's really not. At Izuku's confused look, Kero just sighed. The clasp is done by magic and can only be opened by magic, he deadpanned. Yeah, okay, Izuku nodded, I understand. That doesn't explain anything at all. You just skipped my questions. Kero, knowing Midori needed more convincing, just transformed into his true form. Izuku, not expecting that at all, shrieked when a winged lion dropped to the ground in front of him. Makes sense now? Kero said smugly. Fearing the large lion before him, he nodded frantically. Transforming back, Kero sighed from the stretch. Now, the reason why the book was locked by magic is because of these. Internally, Kero was overwhelmingly happy that none of the cards were lost upon the first encounter, allowing him to open the book and show them to a captive audience. These are the Sakura cards, and they hold major magical power. They were originally created by my creator Clow Reed, the greatest magician of all time. After his death, they were found by my new master and transformer of the cards, Kinomoto Sakura. While Kero was talking, the cards floated from the book, circling the boy. Now, since Sakura sealed them away for the next I was guarding the seal until another with magical power came to claim them. That person is you, Midori. At the half of his name, Izuku looked from the cards that were putting themselves away to Kero. Okay, that's cool, he said skeptically, but how can cards have magic? They look like the old, pre-Quirk tarot cards. Well, when used in conjunction with the sealing staff, they unleash their magic to their MSDR's will. Kero used his magic to grab the first card in the stack, the Windy. Look, does this look like a tarot card to you? Green eyes flicked from the card to Kero, and back again. Yes. Kero slumped in midair. What kind of name is the Windy for a magic card, anyway? He shouldn't have said that. The moment the name of the card was read, a massive gust of wind came by, blowing Kero into Izuku. In the midst of the wind, Izuku watched as the rest of the cards began flying out of the book, disappearing from view in streaks of light. The wind, still blowing, was howling as it kicked up dust, scaring those nearby and gaining the attention of police officers. Once it was finally over, Izuku removed his arms from their positioning over his eyes, letting him view Kero in all his disoriented glory. Decidedly freaked out, Izuku glanced at the book. It was just as he feared. The cards really did fly away. Great. Find an old, magical power and the first thing you do is lose it. Excuse me, a voice piped up from behind. Turning around showed the voice to be belonging to a police officer. CRP. From what I saw, your quirk made that whirlwind? Then she pulled out a notepad, clearly waiting for a response. Izuku was panicking. Magic was probably not supposed to be known, even if Kero decided to do the introductions on the sidewalk. How do I string this? Sorry, officer, I accidentally used magic for the first time? That's stupid genius. A plan made, Izuku spouted out the story he just came up with. Sorry, it was my fault. I was scared when my companion, Kero here he grabbed the still dizzy plush lion, showing him to the female officer, suddenly popped up. I didn't have a quirk before this, so when he surprised me it activated in my panic? Please buy it. Please buy it, Izuku chanted in his head, crossing his toes so it wouldn't be obvious to the officer that he just made all of that up. The officer was busy writing in her notepad for a second longer, then she turned to him head-on. All right, she shrugged. You say this is your first time accessing your quirk? She looked up from her notes, and Izuku nodded. So you wouldn't mind giving me your name as we head to the station? We can call your parents or guardians from there. Izuku nodded once again, not trusting himself to keep the lie. Surprisingly nice, the female officer guided him to her patrol car where her partner was waiting in the passenger seat. Hey, Ikeda, this the cyclone guy? The female officer, Officer Ikeda, apparently nodded, guiding Izuku to the back seat. Yeah, but he says it's his first quirk activation. So, we'll be heading back to the station to verify, and then register if it's true. Officer Ikeda closed the car door, then turned back to Izuku and Kero, who was still spinning slightly. If you happen to be lying, just know the punishment gets worse. Izuku just nodded mutely, watching the buildings pass by. So much for staying safe, Mom? He was snapped from his thoughts when Kero finally came back to the land of the living. The lion plush thing glanced around, then turned to Izuku sheepishly. So, he started. Are we being arrested? He asked. He was quiet enough that the officers up front didn't hear, so Izuku shook his head minutely before whispering to him the cover story. I said that you were my quirk, and you scared me, so I accidentally activated it on instinct. Kero raised an eyebrow, not an eyebrow, really, but it got the notion across at that, silently asking for context. When I said the name of the card, a whirlwind started, affecting everyone near. So, when asked, that's what I told them. Public quirk usage is illegal, so we can be in trouble if it weren't for the fact I'm quirkless. Kero nodded, thankful that magic was able to pass off as quirks even if he doesn't know what those are, but the most important question still had to be answered. What about the cards? And the book? The response was worse than he wanted, but exactly what he expected. When Izuku opened the book, the only card left was Windy. Kero let out a heavy sigh. I'm getting major déjà vu from this whole encounter. Seeing Kero's disappointment, Izuku nudged him with a finger to get his attention. Hey, if you need any help getting them back, I can do it. Besides, now that you're going to be registered as my quirk, you don't have to hide like I'm thinking you would have had to. Kero just nodded, and the two lapsed into silence for the rest of the drive. Occasionally the male officer, Officer Koike, would try and rope either Kero or Izuku into a conversation, but with Izuku's stilted responses and Kero's depressed attitude from losing the cards, it didn't last long. Thankfully, though, the precinct for Lower Mizudafu came up soon enough. Walking between the two officers, Koike cheerfully talking about his pro-hero husband and Ikeda replying with comments about her artist wife, Izuku was guided to sit by a desk. There wasn't a nameplate, but the desk was absolutely covered in reports and statements, each with little Latin T's and F's beside every quote. In the background, other officers were busy taking calls, writing reports, and just generally doing police things. Eventually, there was the sound of footsteps coming closer, and Izuku looked up from his bag. Walking closer was a man that wore an overcoat and fedora, both tan like it was fashionable. Despite the questionable taste in workplace attire, the man sat down at the desk, turning to Izuku after pulling out a notepad. So, he began, you're the kid that made the whirlwind on 15th Street? Izuku nodded and the man checked the notepad. Officer Ikeda and Koike brought you in on the assumption that you've never manifested a quirk before today? Again, a nod. So, to make this easier on everyone, I'm here to use my quirk and tell if you're lying just to get out of the punishment. My name is Detective Tsukachi Neomesa and my quirk is Human Lie Detector, so if you lie to me, I can tell. Izuku subtly nudged his bag to alert Kero. To begin with, what's your name? Midoriya Izuku. Age and quirk? A little redundant, he thought, but acquiesced anyway. 14 and quirkless. Izuku paused, then corrected himself. Sorry, my quirk is unnamed and unidentified? Hopefully that checks out. The detective nods, thank goodness, before continuing. So it seems you were telling the truth about your quirk, and looking you up in the quirk registry dash, he begins typing into the computer, before nodding again, shows that it's legally true. Tsukachi-san opens a drawer, pulling out a notebook, opening it up to the next blank page, then turns to face Izuku head-on. Since your quirk is completely new, and you likely have no idea how to register it, I'll be here to help you. Let's start with something simple. Officer Ikeda recorded that you have a companion. Looks like a lion plush that can fly. He looked up from the notepad to see Izuku. Yeah. He said his name is Caraberos, but to call him Kero. At this unplanned cue, the mentioned lion plush flew from the bag on Izuku's lap. Tsukachi-sen nodded, then proceeded to draw a rough sketch. Okay, And would you say that he is sentient? Of course I am. Why wouldn't I be? But hey, that's a good drawing. Make sure to get my good side. Kero's slight ego could be seen as he stared at the detective's drawing. Above him, Izuku gave the Tsukachi-san an apologetic smile, but he just waved it off. Okay, so we have a sentient quirk named Keraberos, but nicknamed Kero. What caused the whirlwind? Officer Ikeda noted that you had dash. He turned to the notes again, a bright pink book adorned with gold and silver, and that it was also flying? Another nod. May I see it? Complying, Kero fished the book from the yellow school bag. Tsukachi-san stared at the cover. I see. He tried to open the book, but its clasp was locked. Would it be too much to ask you to open it for me? Once again, Izuku complied, opening the book with ease. It really is magic, and then handed it back to the detective. Inside the compartment sat the loan card. When Tsukachi-san grabbed it, Izuku tensed, hoping that he wouldn't. The windy. Now, this is interesting. Izuku tensed further into his chair, but the impending windstorm didn't come. Am I right in assuming that you accidentally used this .card.to cause the whirlwind? Izuku nodded for what felt like the umpteenth time. The detective nodded back, writing something down in the notebook while Kero and Izuku shared a hopeful glance. They're probably almost done. So, Detective Tsukachi said, putting down his pen, in the case where a person is declared quirkless but in actuality has a quirk, we have to recommend you go to quirk counseling for a week in order to avoid an incident like this again. In your case, that's likely easier than not. When Keraberos manifested, he likely was trying to explain what your quirk can do, which is normal for sentient quirks when first manifested. Add in the book and card components, he probably had you use the windy, but since it was so new and had 10 years to develop energy, it was more powerful than he expected. So, with all of that out of the way, what do you want to name your quirk? Detective Tsukachi gave an appraising look to Izuku and Kero, grabbing his pen to record some ideas. Kero and Izuku shared a look. What about magic cards? Izuku's suggestion was shaky at best, but then Kero perked up. You should call it Sakura cards, he said, but then faltered. You can change the name later, right? At the detective and Izuku's questioning look, he continued, well, eventually, after you develop all of your abilities, the cards will transform into Izuku cards. Realizing that explanation might not hold water, he clarified once more. It's just a threshold that shows growth in abilities. Yes, that sort of name change would be fine in the future, Tsukachi-san said, and when Izuku agreed with Kero, he wrote it at the top of the page used to record the information. Done? Tsukachi-san tore the page out of his notebook, handing it over to the teen. I recommend that, when you gain a new card and they transform finally, you head to the QR building in Greater Mizudafu. QR building? Oh, Quirk registration building. Izuku nods and Kero puts both the card and book away. He was just about to get up to bow to the detective for his help when the front door of the precinct opened loudly. Turning to the noise, Izuku found his mother frantically looking for him. Once her eyes locked onto his frame, she started tearing up. The receptionist between them looked panicked, but Izuku just rushed to her. Mom, it's fine, I'm not in any trouble. As he consoled his teary-eyed mother, Tsukachi-san cleared his throat. Jumping apart, Izuku gave the man a sheepish smile. Sorry, Tsukachi-san, she likely thought the worst when you guys called her. The detective just waved his apology away. It's fine, Midoriya-kun, not a problem. It was probably an oversight on our part anyway. He turned to the Midoriya matriarch, extending a hand in greeting. It's a pleasure to meet you, Midoriya-san, and I must apologize if we made you think your son was in trouble. No, it's quite all right, I'm a crier anyway, so this would have happened no matter what. She smiled at him, taking the proffered hand. Now, you said he was involved in a quirk incident? The tears almost made a comeback, but thankfully she held them at bay. Actually, the incident in question was his quirk manifesting for the first time today. Tsukachi-san just smiled like he hadn't just released a tsunami of tears from the woman. Midoriya Izuku, in all his 14 years of life, has never seen his mother cry so fast in his life. In exactly 0.02 seconds flat Midoriya Inko had tears coming from her eyes at a rate fast enough to fill a swimming pool in an hour. Tsukachi, startled and panicking at the woman's reaction, flailed around as he tried to figure out what was wrong. Izuku, used to this, just hugged his mother close, letting her get it all out. 20 minutes later and the two Midoriyas were walking towards the train station, heading to the QR building so that Izuku could finally register his quirk. Occasionally, much to Kero and Izuku's embarrassment, Inko would turn to them and then suddenly burst into tears. Many other passengers in their car offered the woman their condolences, thinking that she was crying due to a loss. Every time she would assure them that she was crying happy tears, saying that it was a joyous occasion. The train ride over, Inko was constantly tearing up, pulling tissues from her purse like a magician pulls bandanas from their pockets. Kero was silent, sitting in his bag after a particularly bad experience with a child. Izuku, meanwhile, consoled his mother, rubbing her back in a comforting manner. The 10-minute train ride was spent trying to build together a reputable story of activation for his quirk. Okay, so today the horoscope for Cancers said to watch for something amazing. I can pretend that I had a dream filled with lucky symbols and that a ladybug landed on my shoulder before Kero and the book appeared. That would tie into all the imagery in the book and be a plausible activation for a mutated quirk. Izuku nodded his head, ready for anything. He was not ready for anything. When they arrived at the QRB, the receptionist had them sign in, and then sit in the waiting room filled with crying kids that just manifested their quirks. 7 times Izuku was nearly hit with errant quirks from curious kids. It would have been fine, if not for the fact that it was the same 2 kids every time. Curse bureaucracy, Izuku thought as the door to his apartment swung open. Setting the pamphlets that he'd been given, Izuku turned to his mother. She was sitting on the couch and he had a sneaking suspicion that the recently dried tears were making a comeback as she slouched. Not liking when his mother cried so much, the teen made his way over, sitting down next to her. In a move that surprised him, Inko turned and grabbed his hands. With a determined shine in her eye, she said, "You have to tell me everything." Kero and Izuku sweat dropped at her conviction. Izuku, knowing that his mother wouldn't let him go until he'd spilled the whole story to her. Modified slightly, of course. So he did. He told her the same story he'd told the man who registered his quirk, how he'd dreamt of Shinto shrines, calicos, and falling leaves, then of the horoscope and ladybug. When it was finally done, she looked ready to cry and Izuku was prepared, grabbing the tissue box on the side table. She waved him off with a watery laugh. "No, it's okay. I'm done now. I'm sorry for crying so much, but I couldn't help but think of the day we got your diagnosis, how you were so heartbroken and I couldn't do anything but apologize. And then I thought about the things people would say about you and I behind our backs, and then it became a thought of how much you've done despite everything, all to be the first quirkless hero. And then I couldn't help but think all his hard work is in vain, all because you got a quirk." Inko devolved into tears again, grabbing tissues by the handful as Izuku tried to reassure her. Kero, floating nearby, just landed on Inko's knee, giving a soft pat. Taking a deep breath, Inko gathered herself again, determined to say what she needed to her son. "You've worked so hard despite your quirk not manifesting, and now that it has, all everyone will see is the quirk and not you." Startling her son, she grabbed onto his shoulders with her deceptively strong hands. "I just need you to know that I'm sorry I didn't answer the way you wanted back then, but I always thought you could do it." In a bout of sobriety, Inko began in a serious tone. "Even with your quirk here, never forget that I have always believed in you, will always believe in you." Izuku could feel himself about to cry. "You've gotten so far without a quirk and I will always remember that, even when you go out there and save the day." She pulled him in for a hug, and then knocked down the dam when she said, "I love you, quirk or no quirk, don't forget that." "That happened," Kero said as Izuku shut his bedroom door. The green-haired teen hummed in agreement, still wiping a few stray tears from his eyes. Izuku, having just been through an emotional roller coaster of a day, wanted to sleep for the next week. With that thought in mind, the green teen walked to his bed and flopped onto the mattress. Hey, you can't go to bed yet? We still got stuff to talk about. Not to mention I need to give you the sealing staff." The boy groaned at his sleep being denied. He flipped over, and at Kero's insistence sat up properly. Can this wait till after school? No way. There's a lot that I don't understand about the world right now, and in order to be an effective guardian, I need to know about it. Izuku sighed, turning his full attention to the guardian. What do you want to know? Kero put a paw beneath his chin, humming to himself in thought. Izuku, knowing that this discussion will become lengthy despite his want for sleep, sets about getting something for Kero to sleep on. He is a very restless sleeper, so he fears if Kero shared the bed he'd be squished. As the boy looked in his closet, Kero finally had an answer. Well, question. Everyone keeps talking about quirks. What are they? The last time I was around, quirk was just used to describe something unique or strange. Fair point, Izuku stated, head still in his closet. A quirk is a meta-ability that came about from a mutation in the human genome. It expresses itself in a variety of ways. Knowing that he'd just go on and on, Izuku pauses his search for Kero's bedding to grab one of the many books on quirk theory that he possesses. Here, he says, opening the book, this chapter tells you all about it. He sets the book on the desk before returning to his task. Maybe he can use a winter hat and scarf? Izuku looked over his selection of hero-themed winter wear, sweat dropping at the sheer number of All Might faces grinning at him. I can get him something better later. This quirk stuff sure is strange, Kero mutters. This says that quirks manifest in early childhood, around 4 and 5? How did they believe us with such a huge red flag? Chapter 17, Izuku says simply. Now, he thinks, holding up 2 scarves, should I let him use the Golden Age All Might scarf or the bronze? He continues weighing his options while Kero flips through the book behind him. The quirk gene mutates randomly, but usually follows a 3-generation pattern, Kero reads to himself. In fact, it is uncommon for a family tree to have a distinct quirk all the way through, but still happens on occasion. The ability to mutate is what makes quirks so unique, besides their obvious ability to give humans meta-abilities. Kero looked up from the book to ask Izuku a question before seeing a dilemma. The green-haired boy was alternating, lifting the scarves in his hands, seemingly unable to choose between them. Izuku, this doesn't say anything about quirks coming in late. And pick one already. Kero's shout had him hastily choosing the Golden Age All Might scarf. Sorry, and that's because you only read the first page before stopping. He turned to his newest companion, then flipped a few pages before pointing at a specific paragraph. Due to the mutatable nature of quirks, it can be noted that some may come in at an unusual time. This may be because the quirk isn't powerful enough to manifest until a later age, or because the quirk manifesting in a child would put too much strain on the human body. It is unknown whether Herm levels or the age itself accounts for the manifestation. Izuku took a pause, tracing his finger down the page until he found the next relevant passage. In another notable case of quirks having specific, seemingly arbitrary requirements before manifesting, TV star Takeda Kamiko's quirk, Infatuation Notes, didn't manifest until she had tripped and fallen 3 times and then been dumped on the same day. There you see. Izuku got back to setting up a bed for Kero. I guessed up, but that doesn't explain how they could accept a sentient component, a book, and developing abilities translated into cards. Izuku sighed, giving the confused guardian an appraising look. Quirks are weird, okay? A pro hero in Ireland has a quirk that is essentially a sentient slot machine that spouts different weapons for each number, all while in the shape of a clown doll. If they can accept that, they can accept the Sakura cards as a quirk. Kero shrugged, unable to dispute that. He tried to think about anything else he might want to know, but the lengthy explanation just so happened to cover it all. The greenette, like he'd been trying to do the whole time, finished setting up the bed for Kero, the hat and scarf used as a pillow and blanket respectively. With that out of the way, Izuku said, we can move on to, what did you call it? A sealing staff. Oh yeah. The Golden Guardian perked up at the mention of the staff, darting to the bag which held the Sakura book. With a glow of golden light, the book was floated to be laying on the desk. Before any cards show up we have to dash. I never noticed before, but the lion on the cover was you, right? Because it's gone now. Nonplussed at the boy's interruption, Kero just continued, "We have to forge the contract between the key of the seal and you, that way it's finally official." "Okay, so, where do I sign? Or do I need to use blood?" The boy mumbled. "Or is this like those old movies where I have to chant in Latin and use crystals? Because I'm telling you now, I don't have any of those on me." Bewildered, Kero shook his head. "No, none of that. This is real magic, none of the TV nonsense you're thinking of. It's better if I just get on with it." Accepting the response, Izuku stood in the center of his room, as directed, watching as Kero began to glow. "Key of the seal." Kero's voice gained an echoey quality as the room faded into a black space. The only light came from Kero's body, the book, and a glowing circle on the ground. Upon further inspection, Izuku makes the connection that the circle on the ground is actually the same as the one on the back of the book. It really was a magic circle. "Someone wishes to make a contract with you, a boy named Izuku." From where the book lay on the desk, a glowing ball came out of the keyhole of the clasp. Izuku could barely make it out, but the key was small, just having room for 2 even teeth and a red gem. The rest of the key, the handle, was formed into the shape of a winged ring holding a golden star. "Key, bestow your power unto him." The key floated over to Izuku, stopping about an arm's length away. The wind began to pick up, but luckily nowhere near the power of Windy. Green eyes watched, rapt with attention as the outer edges of the circle began to pick up dust, swirling around the room. "Release." The key began to spin, the star gyrating in a clockwise motion. The dust that gathered before swirled overhead once more before surrounding the key. Izuku watched as it began to elongate and grow, turning into a golden-poled staff with the star at the head. "Now, grab the staff, Izuku." Complying, the boy did so. When his hand made contact with the metal, it changed from its golden hue to a light green, a pair of miniature, mint wings unfurling at the top. Just as suddenly as the room disappeared, it reappeared, leaving Izuku to stand in the center of his room holding the green sealing staff. It stood at roughly the same height as his shoulder, and Izuku felt out of his depth while holding it. After looking at it for a minute, Izuku says the first thing on his mind, "I thought it'd be pink." Kero's sweat dropped. "You know, so did I." The beast of the seal floats up to be level with Izuku's face, giving the staff a once-over. "I also expected it to be smaller. Last time it was..." Kero shook his head before looking Izuku in the eyes. "Now that you have your sealing staff and first Sakura card, you are the official Cardcaptor, the second of your kind." "Oh, that's what you meant by official?" He swung the staff around like a katana, not really knowing what he's supposed to be doing with it. "So I'm a Cardcaptor now? And judging from the name, I'd assume that my duties are to capture the cards." He used finger quotes, trying to show that he really doesn't understand how a card needed capturing. At this, Kero smiled, reminded of the first time he'd made an official Cardcaptor. Since the cards were released from the seal dash. They are able to activate themselves without any outside forces to guide them. Generally, this means that they just flock to the nearest source of their power, but since they're not cards anymore, you have to fight them in their true forms. True forms? Izuku tilted his head at the not-so-silent question. The way Kero was explaining it, the cards became like monsters, attacking anything in the general vicinity. "Yeah. The card I remember the best is the fly card. When it's loose, it takes the form of a blue bird, looking sorta like a crane. When it was hurt, however, at this Kero's smile became more cocky. It grew to the size of a high rise, using its wings to create gusts of wind to blow away any attackers." Izuku listened. Then he thought it over. And then he paled. The occupants of the Midoriya apartment were sleeping soundly. Izuku was having a content dream about helping All Might defeat villains with his newfound magical powers. Kero, sleeping in his scarf bed, was dreaming about eating sweets with Sakura, Sioran, Yu, and Clow Reed. Inko, the overworked nurse that she was, actually wasn't home, having been called in for a shift at the hospital. All was peaceful and quiet in the apartment. Until it wasn't. A deafening screech filled the air and Izuku was quickly thrown back into consciousness with a yelp. The spooked teen haphazardly threw himself from his bed, almost colliding with Kero in his haste to turn on the light and exit the room. Like any normal citizen during a potential villain attack, Izuku made his way to the TV, quickly turning it to the Hero News Network. Emergency alert. There has been a confirmed sighting of a giant bird akin to that of a crane flying over the lower Mizudafu area. As of right now, it is unknown whether the bird was affected by a quirk or is in fact a quirk itself. The responding heroes at the scene are currently the number 2 hero Endeavor, his sidekick Burnin, and the hero's backdraft and manual. According to eyewitness testimony, the bird appeared out of nowhere before appearing with a loud cry. Of right now nearby citizens are being evacuated as it is flying over the residential area of Lower Mizudafu. The two watched as the screen showed the accurately described giant crane as it beat its wings, pushing the number 2 hero back with the force. The camera panned over the scene before Izuku gasped and raced to the window. The fight's happening only a few blocks away. With a front row seat to the fight, the Greenette and Lion Plush watched as the flame hero threw his namesake towards the bird, singeing its feathers and eliciting another screech. Izuku, Kero said, hoping for the boy's attention, only for him to be ignored. Grunting, Kero floated towards his newest charge, positioning himself right by his ear before yelling, "Izuku!" Startled, the green-haired boy yelped and turned to the Guardian. Now that he finally had the boy's attention, Kero began to relay the situation. "Remember what I was saying before about Fly and getting hurt and then growing bigger?" Izuku was quick to nod. "Good, because that there is Fly, and it's getting attacked just like last time." Kero was quick to fly back into Izuku's room, returning with a jacket held in his mouth, the star key and Windy between his paws. "We need to get you out there and stop Fly before things get any worse than they already are." "What? You mean that I have to fight that?" Izuku points out the window to the giant bird currently being attacked by Endeavor. "That's insane. How can Wind fight a bird the size of an apartment complex?" Izuku continues his complaints even as he puts on the jacket, pockets the magic items, and puts on shoes. He's out the door before he's even taken a breath. The two make a quick path towards the fighting, making sure not to get caught in any panicking citizen's way and hiding from the heroes carrying out the evacuation order. Eventually, the two with the assistance of a fire escape are standing atop an office building in the shadow of the fighting, out of the way of any of the heroes, especially Endeavor. Turning to his companion, Kero says, "Use the staff to call upon Windy." "I don't think I can do this," Izuku called out, nearly inaudible from the sounds of the fight. "Just trust in yourself." Turning back to the giant bird, Izuku lets a shaky breath pass, trying to steel himself. "Yeah, okay," he says to himself. "Sure. I can do this." "Okay, Izuku, how can Wind beat a bird?" "Well, the air needs to pass the wings in order for it to even get any flight, so maybe if that was eliminated it would fall." He shakes his head, a burst of flame appearing nearby as the fighting continued. "Even if the bird fell, it can still walk. I need some way to trap Fly, but how?" Izuku's muttering trails off as he forms a plan. Kero, who had been keeping an eye on both the fight and the newest Cardcaptor, is nervous. How they would be able to do this without legal repercussions, he didn't know, but he trusts in Izuku. If only the Cardcaptor would call upon the staff already. Gathering himself up, Izuku calls out to Fly. "Hey, if you come this way I can help you." He honestly doesn't think that the words would carry, with the flames roaring, heroes yelling and Fly screeching intermittently, but somehow Fly heard and turned his way. Only a block away, Fly prepares to, fly towards the one offering help. Izuku, not actually thinking the plan through, jolts as he realizes what is about to happen. "CRP, Kero said that I need the staff to use the cards properly, but I don't know how." "Kero, you never told me how to call upon the staff." Throwing caution to the Windy, literally Izuku pulls his only card from his jacket pocket. A muttered "here goes nothing" being lost in the chaos. "Windy, guide me up to Fly's back when I jump." Kero, having watched Izuku not summon the staff from the key, yelps in the realization of what Izuku plans. "Izuku, what are you doing?" He races for the green-haired boy as he jumps from the rooftop, but when it comes down to it, he didn't catch him. rather than fall, Windy begins to glow, before releasing a appealing woman in shades of yellow and green that summons forth a wind strong enough to push Izuku up onto Fly's back as it passes. With her job done, Windy returns to her card before flying back into Izuku's hand. Izuku, who had closed his eyes during the whole interaction, opens them with a laugh, disbelieving what he is seeing. I can't believe that actually worked. Not having planned this far ahead, Izuku quickly comes up with a continuation. Since Endeavor and the rest of the heroes are still fighting, I need to get Fly away, just like I promised. Mind made up, Izuku calls out to Windy once again. Windy, give Fly a tailwind while eliminating the headwind and guide it away from the heroes. Once again Windy appears, leaving a trail of her hair in the wind as she flies in front of Fly. In the moment that Fly beats its wings, Kero was speeding to join Izuku, but once the bird began flying there was no way he could catch up, especially not with Windy helping. While they flew, Windy led the way, making little loops as she guided Fly. Izuku, hanging onto the feathers of Fly's back, cheers as he is spirited away from the fight, feeling the wind pass through his hair and making his jacket billow behind him. This is freaking awesome. Izuku watches as the blurred ground eventually loses its shine, the two magic cards having taken them to... Is that Mount Kumatori? Indeed, Fly, with the aid of Windy, had taken them all the way from Yuzutafu, over Tokyo, and into Chichibutamaki National Park. Izuku's sweat dropped at the sight of the peaks and valleys below him. Man, Kero wasn't kidding when he said they hold major magical power. The greenette, now having been flown nearly 170 kilometers, finally lets the situation actually permeate his brain. He looks down and sees the mountains. Looking right, he can see the lights from the Isezaki area shining in the night. The left shows the silhouette of Mount Fuji, the stars providing a perfect backdrop. He then looks down again and promptly freaks out. Holy shit! His scream is high and shrill as he tightens his grip on Fly's feathers, flattening himself to its back in a scramble to be secure. Reminded of his presence, Fly screeches, and in a move that suches the positioning of his heart and stomach, dives down at incredible speeds. Go back, go back, go back! Right before the collision that would have taken Izuku's life, Fly beats its large wings, maneuvering itself in such a way that it lands almost delicately. Windy, who had been their guide this whole time, seems to smile at Fly's antics before returning to Izuku as a card. Now that the earth is back beneath him, Izuku slides off Fly's back, walking towards its head with shaking legs and a moderately upset stomach. The bird and Izuku stare at each other, blue eyes watching as he fidgets with his jacket's edges, trying to figure out what he can do to capture the card. You wouldn't happen to be happy with being a Sakura card, would you? It's a pathetic attempt, but it's quite literally all Izuku has right now. I know I said I'd help you out of there and I did, getting you away from the fight, but I think you'd be safer and happier while as a card? God, I hope Fly can actually understand me. It seemed to earlier when it listened, but would it want to stay? Izuku, in a desperate attempt to save face and not show how out of depth he is, spread his arms in a hopefully friendly manner. The Fly stares at him for a minute longer and the boy twitches under its gaze. In a move that Izuku wasn't expecting, the giant blue form of Fly began to warp, its feathers flying outwards as a slight breeze picked up. Green eyes watched as the great bird began to shrink, its body becoming smaller and smaller until it was roughly the size of a stuffed animal. Taken aback, Izuku stumbles over his own feet as Fly flew into his outstretched arms. Huh, he said softly, you really are docile, aren't you? He shifts his arms around Fly, using a hand to gently pet the bird's head and neck. A soft crooning rumbled from it and Izuku smiled brightly. You're kinda cute, you know? But now I have to seal you, okay? Setting the bird on the ground, Izuku stuffs his hands into his jacket pockets, searching for the key. Pulling out the small object, Izuku stared at it in complete loss of what to do. Okay, Kero said that I need the staff to seal you guys up, but I still have no idea how to activate it? Is that the right terminology? A glance to Fly showed that it didn't know either. Sighing, Izuku tried to remember the words Kero used the first time. I'm really gonna wing this one hard. Kero talked about a contract, so that maybe I just Invoke the contract? Is that a thing? Sighing to himself, he holds the key in his hands, outstretched before him. Key of the seal? In accordance with our contract? I command you. Release. He's really not expecting that to work, with all of his stutterings, so he jumps when the magic circle from before lights up beneath him. The key which he had been holding began floating just last time, swirling around before it started to lengthen into its staff configuration. Now, armed with the sealing staff, Izuku turns to Fly, who had been sitting, watching the exchange. Just as unsure as before, the pajama-clad Cardcaptor held the staff, pointing the star end at the bird. Fly? Mind going back to being a card? Nothing happened. He tries again. Fly card? Return to being a Sakura card. Again, nothing happens. Slightly disappointed, Izuku slumps his shoulders. Where's Kero when you need him? He laments. Does it have to be said in the weird, roundabout way of talking that he used? Like if I said it like, Fly. Return to the guys you were meant to be, Sakura card. Would it work? Much to Izuku's disbelief, annoyance, and genuine surprise, the mock incantation he used worked. The fly beat its wings as it let out happy trills, moving to stand at the end of the staff. The circle appeared once more before a shimmering, iridescent rectangle appeared in the air. Fly's form once again began to warp, before turning into long wisps of blue that spiraled out like ribbons. The ribbons that filled the air swirled overhead, shooting at the shimmering space that the staff formed. Izuku stood, dumbfounded at the amazing display of magic, watching the ribbons vanish on contact with the rectangle. In what felt like minutes but was likely only a moment, the shimmering rectangle solidified, revealing the form of a Sakura card. Holding his hand out, the card floated towards his grasp, allowing him to read the fly on the banner below the picture of the bird he'd just been next to. Oh hey! You did it! Izuku startled at Kero's voice, turning swiftly to see him flying at him. I was really worried that you might not have remembered the staff, but it seems like you're just a natural Sakura was. His plush-like face then contorted in anger, a solid frown coming through. Next time, make sure I'm with you before you go off. You could have been hurt or Fly could have dropped you. Izuku's sweat dropped at the rapid shift of emotions. Alright, sorry. I just didn't really have a plan, and when Fly actually listened, I freaked and did the first thing my brain came up with. A hand came up to cup the back of his neck. I was just as surprised as you were when I jumped, he admitted sheepishly. I wasn't sure Windy would work or not. You decided to jump without knowing Windy would save you? Kero began a rant about irresponsible magic users and naive children. Izuku just let him blow off some steam before he calmed down enough for a conversation again. Hey, so you said that I needed the staff to use the cards? How come I was able to use Windy twice just now without it? Kero, still breathing a bit heavier than normal, took a deep breath. Sometimes they can be used without the staff, but it takes a great deal of magic power from the user if they don't have experience. Earlier today you used Windy to scatter the cards, remember? Izuku nodded. Yeah, it's just like that, only on a larger scale. Now that you've used the staff, you can call the cards without overdrawing your magic, draining yourself in the process. That makes sense, Izuku thought, bobbing his head slightly in agreement. Okay, now I have one more question. Kero floated to be eye level with him, ready to answer. How do we get home? Kero faltered, dropping in the air slightly before he righted himself. You got Fly, right? Hold it out. The green-haired teen nodded, holding the fly out for Kero to see. Okay, now what you need to do is point the end of your staff at it and say something along the lines of, Sakura card, lend me your power. Really? Izuku deadpanned. Well, the words can be changed a bit, Kero shrugged, but the general message has to be the same. You could use the card's name, or even just give out instructions. Calling for help also works if you'd rather do that. Izuku's sweat dropped at the nonchalance Kero used for the words. It took me forever to figure out how to summon the staff, and you're telling me that all I needed to do was ask for help? Wilting at the reminder of his own misfortune, Izuku shook his head. Whatever, he muttered, shifting slightly so he could hold the staff and card at the proper angles. Fly, take us home. The magic circle appeared for the third time, the wind picking up slightly as the card began to glow. With the colored ribbons that had sealed Fly into its card, the magic burst from the card, wrapping Izuku before dissipating. Glancing around for the bird, Izuku gave Kero a mock glare at its absence. I thought Fly was supposed to help us home? Kero didn't respond, only staring at Izuku for a moment before saying, I thought they'd be pink. You thought what would be pink? The wings, Kero said, and if that isn't a major shock, Izuku doesn't know what else would be. Excited because who wouldn't be at the prospect of having wings, and a little scared because who wouldn't be at the prospect of having wings. Izuku turned his head to look at his back. Sure enough, sprouting from his back was a pair of mint green wings, nearly a perfect match to the pair on the staff. Izuku shivered slightly as they moved. The sensation of having wings, even magic wings, felt both strange and it was weird. So this is the power of Fly? Why do you sound disappointed? You got wings. Izuku pouted just barely, but he still pouted. I was kind of excited to see Fly again. Shaking off the admission, Kero grabbed Izuku's attention. So, we need to get home and you have wings. Izuku, just now getting the implications that having wings paled considerably. Ready to fly? Remind me to never do this again. Izuku's panicked shouting rang out in the air as Kero just laughed at the green-haired boy. This isn't funny, Kero. I have no idea how to land and my apartment is right there. True to form, Izuku's apartment building was coming up, the two winged magic users coming in hot towards their landing zone. Thankfully the journey wasn't too hard on Izuku, but the random gusts of wind and the occasional flock of birds definitely freaked him out. Now, after Kero had taught him the mechanics of winged flight, Izuku had to learn how to land. The only problem? He has one chance, and if he messes this up, he'll be spending the night in the hospital and have to explain to his mother where he'd been. Izuku, calm down. You're overthinking it again. You don't need to know exactly how to use the wings, just let Fly guide you and follow your instincts. That's easy for you to say. You're not the one that has breakable bones. Regardless, Izuku did listen, taking a deep breath before letting Fly guide. It was an odd sensation for someone that relies on their mind like Izuku, but instinctually flapping wings downwards with the guidance from a magic card wasn't too bad. Trusting the magic to not let him get hurt, Izuku dove for his building's rooftop before abruptly turning and beating his wings to slow his descent to a safer speed. Once the boy was on solid ground, the wings dissipated in a flurry of mint feathers, the fly reappearing in Izuku's hand. That wasn't so bad, right? You had fun, right? The green-haired boy's eyes found Kero, making the lion plush tense up just slightly. Remind me to ask all necessary questions before I do something like that again. Noted, Kero's sweat dropped. But I did have fun. The two made their way down the access stairs before Izuku suddenly stopped. What time is it? He searched his pockets for his phone, but it wasn't there. Right, Kero grabbed my stuff. He probably didn't think to grab it. What's wrong now? If it's past 4 then my mom will be home, Izuku explained, now rushing down the stairs. If she's home, then she'll see us walk in after assuming we were asleep, and if that happens I'll be grounded for a week. Kero flew at head level with Izuku, turning the corners with the green-haired boy. You say that like it's happened before. That's because it has. The two turned the last corner before not quite sprinting down the walkways. Hero fights are best in person, and when some of your favorite heroes only patrol at night, you have to sneak out sometimes. So, what you mean to say is, I like going out at night, searching for literal danger, and my mom has had to punish me before because of it. The two stopped before the apartment door, Kero turning to look at Izuku. Is that right? The boy let out a shaky sigh, inserting the key before motioning for quiet. Kero took this as an admission by silence, but Izuku wasn't really paying attention because the TV was on. Holy see, this is going to be so much worse than the night I got lost trying to find Knuckle Duster, or even that time I went to Hosu looking for Eraserhead during the middle of a manhunt. Izuku took in a deep breath, preparing himself for the inevitable punishment, only to exit the doorway and find the living room unoccupied. He slumped forward in relief and made his way to his bedroom. We just left it on before leaving. Holy jeez, I almost had a heart attack. Closing the bedroom door behind him, the Greenette and the Golden Guardian shambled their way into bed, the day's events catching up with them, leaving them exhausted without the adrenaline of a card fight. With a stray thought, Izuku managed to turn on his alarm before burying himself in his sheets. A nearly silent night was uttered before the two were sent right back off into unconsciousness. Inko Midoriya was seated at the table, watching her son tiredly walk in from outside. He looked panicked when he noticed the TV, but then rushed to his room. Now, Inko is a kind woman, so she'll wait until tomorrow to dish out her son's punishment. Running out in the middle of the night, presumably to watch the fight with the giant bird that was all over the news, is not behavior that Inko should have to teach her son is bad, but here she is. She takes another sip of her tea, sighing as she looks at the pictures along the wall, the frames reflecting the light of the TV screen. Oh Hisashi, how I wish you were here. Okay, but what if I need to use a card and the key is still in my pocket, and the cards are in my bag? Will they still activate like the first time I actively used Windy, or will nothing happen? I get that they're magic cards and whatnot, but how can they have personalities? How can they sense danger, even? Is their definition of danger the same as ours, or is it different? Like, would Fly consider falling from a great height dangerous, or because of its bird nature, not even think twice? Kero, these are things I need to know. Kero heaved a sigh so heavy that it gave Izuku pause, but just for a second before he began his rambling again. It was officially Izuku's first day as a Cardcaptor and his first day in school with a registered quirk, even if it was actually magic. He was just about to get to his questions about the significance of the star imagery that was everywhere when Kero cried out. Izuku, buddy pal, you have got to slow down your interrogation. Izuku paused in his steps, giving his companion an apologetic smile. Sorry, Kero, I just really want to know. That's fine, I get that. It's reasonable even, but you have to stop rambling in order for me to answer your questions. The flying lion plush breathed out a sigh of relief when Izuku didn't immediately start questioning again. Looking at Izuku, he gave a paw motion to continue. Okay, so, he started, continuing his walk to school. First question, just how many Sakura cards are there? When you were first showing them to me, it looked like there was a full deck. Am I going to have to fight 50 more cards? Actually, yeah, except there are 53 in total. Izuku sputtered, but Kero just ignored the reaction. Clow Reed made the cards so he could easily perform magical feats. He originally couldn't decide just how many to make, so he chose to make them like a full deck since they were to be cards anyway. Because of that, we now have to find, subdue and seal 51 more of Clow's favorite magical spells, Dr. Give or take on the favorite description. Oh God! After a school day filled with whispering and gawking and surprisingly no Bakugo, Izuku and Kero made their way back home. There they spent the time completing homework and watching the news, respectively. Now they were sitting in Izuku's room, a notebook in the boy's lap while Kero was snacking on a portion of pudding. Okay, so we have a total of 53 cards, and we already have Windy and Fly, Izuku started. He picked up the Sakura book, turning it over to look at the back. And based on the kanji on the magic circle, water, fire and earth are a part of that list, what with the 4 directions and 4 elements motif. He looked up from his notebook at Kero, who was happily eating the dessert roughly the same size as himself. Clow Reed was half Chinese and half British? Kero nodded, another scoop of pudding disappearing into his mouth. That means I can expect wood and metal cards, right? Kero shakes his head and Izuku groans. You know, this would be a lot easier if you helped me. Wasn't it you who said that I need to know what I'm up against? The Greenette sends the Guardian a glare as he just keeps eating with a dopey grin. I won't give you any more sweets if you don't even pretend to help me. Kero lets out a cry of alarm, pushing the pudding behind him to protect. Okay, I'll help. He floats over to Izuku's open notebook, standing on the end. You're on the right track with the 4 elements and with wood, but there is no metal, so you can cross that one off your list. Kero rubs his chin as Izuku does just that, at least I think? You think? You mean you don't know? He asks incredulously. You're the beast of the seal, shouldn't you know the names of the cards you're protecting? Hey, pouts Kero, I'll have you know that being in a book and unable to get a refresher course for decades takes a toll on the memory for anyone. The plush crosses his arms, turning his head indignantly. Sorry, you're right. In any case, Kero acquiesced, you need to add the light and the dark cards to your list. Those 2 and the 4 elements make up the 6 most powerful cards in total, but after that, I can't really remember any others right now. Kero shrugged, flying back to his pudding, anger forgotten in favor of the sweet. If I see the card I can tell you, but without my memory being jogged. He shook his head in apology. That's okay, Izuku says. That's more than we knew of in the beginning, and there are 4 that I know are in the list. Mist, Cloud, Maze, and Illusion. I mean, now that you say it I remember, but how'd you know? Well, remember when, before I blew away the cards, you had them circle me? Well, I was reading them because I was thinking that the tarot cards had funky names, and then you said they were magic, so I thought, why'd you need a Mist and Cloud card? Maze and Illusion? I just thought they would be fun to mess around with once you let me, he admitted sheepishly. Kero laughed heartily as he finished his pudding. Izuku, Inko called from the living room. Can you come here for a minute? Izuku and Kero follow his mother's instructions, sitting beside her on the couch as they wait for her to begin. I would start off with the obligatory, what were you thinking? But I'm pretty sure you've heard that one all before. Her son froze up, paling at the implications of what she'd just said. Now, I don't need to explain how dangerous it is for you to rush after hero fights, but I feel like I do need to remind you just how much more dangerous it is at night. Inko clears her throat after her passionate speech. Now that that's out of the way, she says, your time after school until 6 will be spent offering your time at the local pet rescue. Izuku tries to cut in, but he's met with a glare. I know, that only leaves you with an hour to look for heroes in town, but I think it's for the best that you don't go looking for them right now because you're grounded. You will go to school, help at the shelter, maybe find a hero or 2, and then come right home and do your homework and chores. This lasts a month. Her son's face fell, but then he nodded in acceptance. It was honestly rather fair. She could not let him do anything outside the house for a month but was still letting him some freedom. Plus, he got to spend time with animals, so that's not much of a punishment anyway, and he still has the weekends free. Let's start on dinner, hey honey? We still need to celebrate your quirk coming in, and I feel like having Katsudon tonight. Her son smiled at her and she gave him a quick hug. The Midoriya family and Kero were sitting at the table, enjoying a nice meal of Katsudon to belatedly celebrate Izuku's quirk coming in when a knock at the door made them pause. Were you expecting anyone? Inko asked her son. No, he shook his head. Maybe it's Aunt Mitsuki, he mused. You did tell her about my quirk before getting called in last night. You're probably right. Ko-chan, you in? I got a gift for the little brat. Inko and Izuku sweat dropped. Yeah, that was Mitsuki, or coming, Michan. Izuku smiled as his mother went to the door. After the diagnosis, most of his mother's friends drifted, all except the Bakugos, oddly enough. With Inko and Mitsuki sharing a dorm in college and then helping the other find their husband, it probably wasn't too hard to see that they'd stay. If only their son was the same. In perhaps the world's greatest joke, Bakugo Mitsuki and Mayu actually brought Katsuki with them, and while the parents greeted each other his red eyes locked onto Izuku's green. Now, Katsuki would never hurt him in his own apartment, but just the fact that he was there promised some kind of danger if the way he began stalking towards him meant anything. I see you even brought Katsuki-kun with you. In a move that only Midoriya Inko could survive, she ran a hand through Katsuki's spiky hair, even pinching his cheek slightly. Kero, unknowing of the ways of surviving an encounter with the walking bomb that is Bakugo Katsuki, laughs at his expression. Izuku tenses for the inevitable shouting match that would come because Katsuki can't be insulted and Kero doesn't stop. 1 second. 10. The greenette looks at Katsuki, wondering just why he hasn't gone off yet. The explosive blonde's eyes are wide and his mouth is open just a tad, as though he dropped his jaw in shock. That can't be right. Katsuki, I've never actually seen Katsuki look like this before, except for maybe once when we were kids. Izuku's thoughts are stopped by something landing on the table. Hey, kid, congratulations on activating your quirk after all these years. Aunt Mitsuki's loud voice arrives just a second before she's wrapping him in a tight hug. Oh, I just told Inko that you were special. Uncle Masaru's sweat dropped at her enthusiasm. Mitsuki, you should probably let him breathe. At the reminder that most humans need air to survive, Mitsuki releases the green-haired boy. I know, she says. I'm just happy. I can be happy, can't I? Come, now Michun, let's save Izuku from your smothering and let him open his gift. At his mother's insistence, the two families sat around the table. Katsuki, much to Izuku's distaste, was to the left of himself, while his mom headed the table. The elder Bakugos were sat across from them, happily pushing a gift bag towards the younger Midoriya. We know that you're probably the most up-to-date on everything quirks, and we already gifted you something All Might branded, so we thought to get you something for Kero. Inside the bag was a personalized animal bed, decorated in patterns of stars and moons with an embroidered Caraberos along the front. The space theme, alongside the custom blankets for the bed, was very nice. They must have made it themselves. Kero, who had been bursting with enthusiasm for the gift, burst into tears when he saw the name. It took a little while, but eventually, they got him to calm down enough that he wasn't wailing. With Kero occupying the adults in the living room, Katsuki nearly dragged Izuku into his own bedroom. Wa, Katsuki! Izuku hissed, quietly protesting the rough treatment. Katsuki just ignored him, like usual, but he did slow down just a tad so he could at least walk without tripping over his own feet. What the heck? He nearly yelled as the blonde very well threw him onto his bedroom floor. You don't just do that to people. In Bakugo Katsuki fashion, he was ignored, only able to watch as the blonde rummaged around his desk before pulling out one of Izuku's spare notebooks. You still remember where I put those? Katsuki scoffed, flipping it open and snatching a pen as he began to write vigorously. You could at least talk to me if you're going to throw me around and ruin my stuff. Greenette moved to his bed, crossing his arms as the blonde just scoffed again. Just as Izuku was about to throw another proverbial bone to get the egotistical blonde to say something, the notebook was shoved into his face. Can't effing talk, dipshit? The boy read aloud. Started after Auntie called the old hag about your quirk. He looked up at the blonde, an eyebrow raised. And you think this is my fault somehow? I knew you hated me, but wow. Katsuki scowled, stealing back the notebook to furiously write something more, then move it back into Izuku's hands. My effing voice disappeared while I complained about how the hag was too loud in cheering for you. Obviously, that has to be something. I guess. Izuku scratched the back of his head. But why would I even want to fix it if my quirk is the cause? The blonde growls lowly as small explosions begin popping from his clenched fists. It's quite clearly a promise of pain, but it doesn't work because Izuku knows it's an empty threat with their parents in the other room. Also, the greenette doesn't exactly know if the culprit is a Sakura card or not. Trying to sense the card, as Kero had said earlier, doesn't exactly amount to anything. The continued sounds of mini explosions bring Izuku back to the present. You do know that you're not making a good case for yourself, right? Green eyes glint as they lock onto Katsuki's red. Why would I help you? Without your voice you won't be as accepted by the community as a hero, meaning you'd never fulfill your dream of being number one. He shakes his head mockingly at the mute blonde. You can see how this is a bonus for me and not a minus, right? I've always wanted to say something like that to Katsuki. I just can't believe that I actually got the chance. He can't even do anything about it because of our parents. It's the perfect revenge. Izuku's inner musings are brought to a stop when the notebook Katsuki has been using to communicate is thrown back into his face. He looks down to read it. You have got to do better than that, he says in disbelief. The book is exchanged once more before Izuku nods. Better than nothing, I suppose. He stands up, opening the drawer he's been keeping the Sakura book in, laying it flat on the desk as he grabbed the key. You have to know that this could very well be a villain attack gone wrong, right? No need to threaten me with your explosions. I'm still helping. I'm just saying this might not work. A grunt from the blonde signifies his understanding. With that out of the way, Izuku tells the other to sit on the bed as the greenette stands a few meters away. I actually know what I'm doing this time, he thinks, holding out the key. Sure, I can use the short version, Kero said, but I can also go all out to show Katsuki just how cool it is. Key of the Star. Izuku watched in muted humor as Katsuki jumped slightly at the room disappearing and the glowing magic circle beneath his feet. A tiny smirk formed as the blonde's head whipped around, trying to find where the room went. Reveal your true form before me. A wind began to pick up, swirling the magic dust, as Izuku has just now started calling it. Katsuki, who was watching everything with a new scowl, got hit in the face with the dust, leaving the younger boy to try his best not to interrupt the incantation with small giggles. I, Izuku, command you, release. The key began spinning, elongating, and changing, the wind blowing harder as the staff formed. Izuku kept an eye on Katsuki, watching as he continued to scowl, minutely rubbing his eyes. Finally done, the room reappeared and Izuku was left standing with the green staff. Now that that's out of the way, Izuku sighed, I have to dash. Before he could continue any further, the bedroom door opened to reveal Kero. Izuku, what's going on? I sense dash. The lion plush paused, verbally backtracking. Behind him stood their parents, questioning looks on their faces, all too telling that they, too, had no idea what was going on. Aha! Kero rubbed the back of his head. So, Izuku, what's going on? The greenette was about to open his mouth, but Katsuki beat him to it, throwing the notebook at their parents, not before ripping out the agreement they'd made. He lost his voice? Kero questioned. Oh yeah, Mitsuki said. Last night, right after you called, Ko-chan, Katsuki was talking, and then all of a sudden, poof. She made a mock explosion with her hands. He just cut off, and ever since he couldn't talk. We took him to the doctor and they said his vocal cords are fine, but they just aren't making sounds. So what does this have to do with Izuku? Well, Kero cut in, this could be the work of Dash. Izuku, sensing Kero was about to slip up and call it a Sakura card, glared at the Golden Guardian, Izuku's quirk. Kero coughed. Really? Mitsuki questioned. But we were so far away when it manifested. Since my quirk seems to be in the category of specialty quirks, it's possible that some of the abilities that I'll gain have different aspects to activate, just like my quirk did when it first appeared. Izuku rushed out. He needs them to not question him having a staff, a book, cards, and Kero, but hopefully they believe him like they do for any other quirk-related matters. In fact, Kero was telling me earlier that I will likely gain a mass variety of powers as I grow, and since it's still new, they very well could activate strangely. God, I really have to prepare my lies rather than just make it up on the spot. Thankfully, however, nobody called him out, and Katsuki only scoffed as if to say, only a shitty nerd like you would get such a stupid quirk. I guess that makes sense, yeah, Masaru says, and all the parents nod along, agreeing. But why did it take Katsuki's voice? Maybe Izuku's quirk subconsciously activated after having to listen to the brat's constant yapping about winning and being the best. Mitsuki laughed at her own joke, even managing to duck the pillow that Katsuki threw at her. The three parents laughed at Katsuki's antics, meandering to the living room again. Kero, now having the chance to speak, floats up to Izuku. He lost his voice? A nod from the grumpy blonde. Well, this must be the voice. It likes listening to people, but when it finds a voice that it particularly likes or dislikes, it steals it for itself. The greenette blanched. Don't worry, Kero said flippantly. After we attract it with the sound of another pretty voice, then we can get your quirk to stop. Izuku stopped his warning glare as Kero devolved into another bout of coughing. We need a nice-sounding voice to attract it? Izuku hummed in thought, gripping the staff tightly. I might just have something. After a 3-minute debate between song choices with a non-verbal Katsuki, Kero pressed play on the music video. It was suggested by Izuku, since neither of the two could sing, that they just play one of present mix songs to attract the voice. Katsuki, sitting on the bed, was crossing his arms and scowling at the younger boy while Kero and Izuku hid in his closet, ready to jump out and seal the card. Just as the lyrics from the Voice Hero's newest hit song rang out, A sprite flew in from the window. Izuku stared at the pink harpy-like figure as it flew around the room, seemingly to pinpoint where the voice was coming from. Silently, Izuku crept out from behind the door until he was fully in the room. Voice card, return to the guys you were meant to be. The harpy startled and tried to fly away, but the rectangle that formed in the air sent out its ribbons, ensnaring the voice. Katsuki and Izuku watched as the harpy continued to struggle as its body began to give way, being pulled into the card. Once done, the glowing of the card stopped, flying neatly into Izuku's outstretched hand. Remember our deal, Bakugo? The greenette turned to the explosive blonde, waiting for both his voice and understanding. Yes, I do. Kero flinched at the swear, but Izuku just smiled. Good. He pointed to the door with the staff. Now get out of my room. So what was the deal that you and that spike ball made? Seemed kinda important to me, but you didn't tell anyone else. The two were on their way to school. The night before, Izuku had celebrated his quirk with the Bakugos, while also capturing the voice after it had stolen Katsuki's. Now, Izuku was just smiling as he walked, finally ready to have a school day where Katsuki was present and not out to kill him. I made him promise not to be a bother until UA's exams. But isn't he a bully? Kero asked. How are you sure that he'll even listen to you? He could be plotting an ambush right now. The golden lion plush spun in the air as if looking for hidden traps. Izuku laughed at the thought of Katsuki waiting for anything. He won't. How do you know? His pride. And he left it at that. The classroom was tense. 2 days ago, Bakugo Katsuki bullied Midoriya Izuku. Yesterday, Midoriya came into school with a quirk and Bakugo was absent. 2 things that literally never have happened before. Now, Bakugo was sitting at his desk, having arrived just as early as usual, but he was ignoring his usual posse of SCK-ups. Like normal. But then Midoriya comes in, his quirk companion flying beside him as though the two hadn't just plunged the whole room into the Antarctic. The whole class stares as the green-haired boy walks to his seat, calmly sitting down without passing anybody an eyelash. Bakugo, when the boy passed his desk, didn't do anything. Not a shout, explosion, or even a glance at the boy. Literally everyone present was waiting for the bomb to drop. Something had to happen. Breaths caught in throats as the boy stood up, then walked to stand beside the explosive blonde's desk. The posse cleared out as soon as the boy got up. Hey, Katsuki. The class collectively thought, he's going to die, when the blonde finally looked up. Bakugo didn't do anything other than look at the boy, but for some reason, Midoriya was asking for it. It was so nice of you and your parents to come over and celebrate with my mom and me. The grunette extended a hand towards the blonde and the class could clearly see the amputation happen in their mind's eye. Let's do it again sometime. Everyone waited with bated breath for the blonde's violent reaction. Red eyes went from Midoriya's hand to his face. A scowl formed and people braced. Only if Auntie invites us. I'm not heading over just to hang out with your shitty butt. What the hell? Reasons why Midoriya Izuku is having a great Saturday. 1. It has been almost 1 week since the last time that Bakugo Katsuki has interacted with him without outside interference. 2. All Might was seen in Greater Muzudafu by the Wonder Aquarium. He saved 13 people and a seal after a villain attack. 3. Kamui Woods was spotted 3 blocks from where Izuku is now standing. 4. Endeavor is making a reappearance in the Muzudafu area for a lead on a case. 5. All Might and Endeavor in the same city means there is a high likelihood of them being near one another, leading to exclusive, candid photos of the heroes. After checking the hero news one last time, Izuku begins his sprint to find as many heroes as he can around the city. If he happens to run into the number 1 and number 2 hero, that's just fate. He begins his hero-watching patrol not stalking route, Kero near the lower Muzudafu Mall, finding the heroes Stage Man and Sparkle Queen, getting an autograph from both of them. Eventually, the green-haired boy made his way to where the news reported Endeavor being, which is really counterproductive when working on a case when a familiar head of spiky, ash-blonde hair passed by. Spiky? What's he doing here? Kero asked. Izuku perked up from his phone, glancing at the blonde as they walked. Katsuki's actually just as much a hero nerd as I am. Kero gave Izuku a look of disbelief. No, it's true. When we were younger he'd always get the newest All Might merch first, and as we got older, I'd see him in lines for Hero Con and autograph signings at different bookstores. Oi! Izuku turned to see that Katsuki hadn't walked away as he'd thought. Izuku's sweat dropped at Kero's responding growl. Don't be spouting shit about me, Midoriya. Just call me Izuku, Izuku stammered. Since they weren't exactly enemies anymore, they could be called friends? No, not yet, but something more like acquaintances. I've been calling you Katsuki in my head, anyway. Not the point, Izuku. When you say it like that, you make it sound like it's a bad thing. Izuku laughed at the blonde's antics, happy that they can do this, interact without him getting attacked. Also, it's not shit about you when it's all the truth. The blonde glared at Izuku, who just folded his arms at the display. You can't tell me you aren't headed towards Takamata's market just to see Endeavor. F you. No thanks, Izuku responded cheerily. It seems a week has done something good for Katsuki. Maybe he should extend the threat to UA's midterms. Well, this week has been amazing for me, too, what with not having to deal with constant explosions. Somehow, even after Katsuki and Kero expressed their disdain for one another, Izuku managed to get them to form a trio. Right now, they were turning the corner for the market tree. Indeed, a singular, large oak tree grew in the center of Takamata's market. It was easily taller than the surrounding buildings and the roots could be seen extending at least 10 meters from the trunk. How the F this get here? Katsuki asked in his own colorful way. The blonde pulled out his phone, opening the news app. They haven't even reported it yet, so there must be a villain nearby. Or, Kero cut in, maybe it's just Izuku's Quirk acting up again? His black eyes bore into Izuku's head, willing the greenette to make the connection. What? Right. What the FS that's supposed to mean? It means, Katsuki, that I have to deactivate my Quirk again. You know, like last time? Izuku fished the key from around his neck. Thank God Kero did this preparing to awaken it when the tree began to grow before their very eyes. What's dash? Katsuki's question was interrupted by a ball of flame flying towards the tree, exploding on contact. Swiftly turning around showed that the flame hero, Endeavor, was on the scene. Izuku quickly! Kero's shout was filled with concern and general nerves from the fire. Right. The magic circle began to glow beneath Izuku's feet. Key of Stars, release. The key undergoes its transformation, leaving Izuku the staff. Green Eyes watches the flame hero continues his barrage of flames, not caring for those around, namely, Izuku and company. Katsuki, we gotta get out of the way. The blonde looked half a second to vehemently declining when a ball of fire nearly burned him. Reluctantly the trio entered a side store. As the trio watched Endeavor pour more flames, he's really going at it, huh? Well, his case does have to do with a villain who controls plants, so... At the still-growing oak, eyes wide when the hero let up and the bark wasn't even singed. Kero, what's going on? Katsuki had to back away from the windows when Endeavor started his attacks once more. Combustible sweat doesn't go well with fire, so it goes the same with general heat. I don't know, the lion plush replies. In truth, he's slightly relieved but mainly sad. The wood is such a nice card. She doesn't deserve such harsh, unforgiving treatment. Wood is highly susceptible to flames, but for some reason it's unaffected? A shout of rage echoes in the now deserted market, probably because Endeavor sees that his attacks are having no effect on the supposed villain. The number 2 hero raises another fist, probably to release more fire, when a grouping of flames jumps from its position on his shoulders, hovering between the tree and the flame hero. Now what dash? The greenette can't even finish his question before the rouge ball of flame turns into an angel. The angel itself is made of flames from the waist down. No prominent features were discernible about its torso, but it only seemed to be wearing metal bands on its upper arms and a strange necklace. Surrounding it was a pair of wings made of orange fire, matching the color of its eyes. This your quirk too, Izuku? Katsuki's question has less bite than expected, But that's probably because a villain from a few months ago had a similar ability. The only problem with that theory was the fact that she'd been caught and taken to prison only 2 weeks after her debut. Probably? The greenette shrugged absently as the hero and presumed card fought, fire colliding and shooting into the air. Probably. You mean you don't even effing know? I didn't know that my quirk had done what it did to you. How am I supposed to know? I've had it for barely 7 days. Red eyes met green, both glaring with the heat matching the fight just past the glass. Katsuki opened his mouth probably to say something rude when Kero got his attention. Izuku, you gotta do something. Wood doesn't do well with fire, and I'm assuming she only grew here because she sensed the hothead. The green-haired boy flinched at the thought. The cards are sentient at least, according to Kero, so Wood is probably in pain, and Fiery is just defending her. Green hair bobbed as Izuku nodded. Right? He said, pulling out Windy from his bag. Man, I need to clean this out. The greenette shook his head, opening the glass door, bracing against the nearly oppressing heat wave that followed. Green eyes watched for just a moment longer, following the 2 fire users. Is it really using if it is fire? Before finding an opening, Endeavor had to take a breather as it was getting a bit too hot in the street. Windy, 'cause of vortex to surround Fiery, suffocate it. Izuku threw out the Windy, activating it with the end of the staff. From the card burst the form of Windy, as she surrounded the androgynous angel that was Fiery. The wind picked up as a small vortex of wind began suffocating Fiery. Nearby, Endeavor glared at the green-haired boy. Soon, Fiery was left to be only just taller than Izuku's knee, their magic unable to keep feeding the flames as Windy blew them apart. Seeing that Fiery was sufficiently weakened, Izuku called out, "Return to your form confined." The shimmering rectangle formed, but this time with a second, both extending their ribbons outwards. The tree itself began to glow as the flame began to be pulled in. The tree's branches were the first to disappear, and then the roots, and finally the trunk. The stubborn Fiery continued to struggle against the magic, until it, too, was pulled in, leaving Izuku with 2 new cards. Looking at the new additions found Izuku in ownership of the wood and the Fiery, the wood looking like a woodland sprite, a dryad from Western mythology, and the Fiery like an androgynous, fiery angel, just as it had in its released form. Young man, you better have a good explanation for using your quirk to antagonize me like this. Izuku's wonderment at the cards was broken by the gruff voice of Endeavor. Looking up brought the image of the scowling hero and a few police officers behind him, each one having an expression that screamed trouble. I'm dead. Oi, he's had his quirk for barely even a week. The heroes and police officers turned to the angry blonde that just appeared at the greenette's side. Kero seemed to have followed the blonde, rejoining the Cardcaptor in the face of all the officers. Do not lie to me, boy. It's true. Izuku stammered out. The glares were swiftly directed at himself again. IG got it the most recent Tuesday, you can check the registry. The green-haired boy shrank under the scrutinizing glare of Endeavor, the number 2 hero. After reassuring the officers and heroes countless times that, yes, I just got my quirk, and, no, I didn't mean to attack anyone, and a few, no, I didn't even know I could do that. In the end, Izuku was left with a warning and recommendation for quirk counseling. But the main thing that was permeating the boy's mind was, I can't believe Katsuki would leave me to the sharks like that. 1 second he's defending me from the wrath of the number 2 hero, and the next he just walks away. Izuku throws the rusted bike frame he'd been holding into the dumpster. After the whole debacle with Wood and Fiery, he tried to look for more heroes but just couldn't bring himself to do it. The interaction he'd gotten with Endeavor left him emotionally drained, as though he'd been dealing with 6 Bakugo Katsukis at once. Now the pair were at Takoba Beach, and Izuku was angrily loading the disposable trash from the sand into the city-provided dumpsters for his weight training. Kero, who'd silently watched the whole thing happen, wearily floated above. Can you really blame him though? He asked. Yes. I can. Izuku shouted in response, each syllable accompanied with a pull on a microwave, yanking it free from the pile at his feet. He knows I'm not good with confrontation. Heck, I'm not even good with people even being mildly upset with me. The microwave crashes heavily in the dumpster as Izuku is already grabbing something else to add. I knew we weren't friends, but I at least thought he'd help me out a bit more. Kero thought it best to not speak after that point. He could only watch as Izuku progressively got angrier and angrier, ranting as he picked up bigger and bigger things. Kero's sweat dropped at the action, but at least the beach was getting cleaned as a result. Behind the irate boy and his companion, the waves crashed against the sands. I mean, come on. With how he'd acted before the whole incident, I had hoped that he'd gotten better, but no. He can't be bothered to help anybody but himself. A particularly stubborn washing machine was being kicked by the greenette, not at all helping in the process of getting it out of the hole it had fallen into. The waves grew in size, the water creeping up the shore, reaching farther than normal at high tide. Kero, noticing this, tries to alert the boy. Izuku? And he just keeps doing this kind of thing, acting like he's better and everyone else is lesser. It makes me sick. Suffice to say he didn't hear him. With one last kick, the washing machine finally came free, and Izuku began his journey to the dumpster. The water level rose more, as did Kero's panic. Izuku, buddy? I hope that one day Katsuki needs my help, and I just let him have it. I just dash. Izuku! Shouts. What? The boy turns around to face the plush, stomping his feet in his anger. Wordlessly, the guardian motions to the water. In his anger, Izuku failed to notice the water level rising, reaching all the way to the tips of his red high tops by the access stairs. All around him the garbage was submerged in the salty water, shifting the piles and causing things to fall. Did I do that? The greenette asked his winged companion. I hope so, Kero says. Because if it's what I think it is, then we have a big problem. As he says this, the water only a few meters away begins to bubble up in an unnatural way. In only a few moments the bubbling water takes the form of a siren-like figure. I spoke too soon, Kero groaned. In a flash Izuku summoned his staff, pointing it angrily towards the hissing siren. I'm not in the mood, Watery. Now having a proper target for his anger, Izuku yells as he runs to Watery's body, swinging the staff once in range. I came here to let off steam, and you just happen to be here as well? Great, he says sarcastically. The green-haired boy ducks under a spout of water aimed at his head, continuing his assault on Watery. From above, Kero tried to shout encouragement and tactics. You can't capture Watery until it's been separated from the ocean. If you keep swinging, all you'll do is tire yourself out. Thanks. Izuku darts backward, nearly tripping over an errant bike handle. Eventually, he makes it to the road proper, and he stands there tauntingly. Bet you're too scared to try and catch me. He yells, and it achieves the desired effect. Hissing, Watery shoots forwards, two water spouts coming with her in her haste to attack the Cardcaptor. Before the attacks hit, Izuku has summoned both Fly and Windy, using the first to dodge into the air and the second to cut the connection. Windy complies, using a powerful gust of wind to disperse the line of water that connected Watery to the ocean. Yeah. Faster than he could blink, the water droplets that Windy had scattered regrouped, reattaching Watery to her source of power. No! A couple of air maneuvers that left Izuku feeling sick later, and the two were at an impasse. Izuku wanted this to be done, and Watery wanted this to be done, but the ways they wanted it to be done were fundamentally different. Izuku wanted a card, and Watery wanted freedom. Izuku, Kero shouted, flying right up to the boy, use fiery. Right, why didn't I think of that? He lamented. Dodging another barrage of water attacks, Izuku pulled the fiery from his pocket. Just as he was about to summon the fiery angel, Izuku paused, but not before evading another attack. If I just use fiery, then Watery will put it out. But if I use windy too, then I can strengthen fiery's wall. Fiery, cut off Watery's supply. Windy, help fiery out. In an instant the two were off. Watery tried to hold off fiery's attack and wall, but with Windy deflecting the attacks and strengthening the firewall, it was effectively cut off. Now you have to trap it, otherwise it'll just keep going. Right. Pulling out the final piece to his barely structured, angry plan, Izuku called out, Wood, summon mangrove trees and use them to absorb watery. From the card burst the wood, her form like that of an elegant dryad. With explosive movement roots plunged themselves through watery's form, digging into the ground. As the seconds passed, more and more roots appeared, taking with it a bit of watery at a time. Watery continued her struggle until finally wood had grown large enough, completely engulfing the card in itself. Now that the danger was over, Izuku and Kero made their way to ground level, the former walking to the new tree and the latter flying. Watery, return to your form confined. Izuku pointed the staff at the tree as the magic circle flared beneath him. The blank card appeared as the magic that held Watery unraveled like ribbons. The pair watched, tired, as the card was fully pulled in, floating in finality to Izuku's outstretched hand. With Watery gone, the ocean water receded, the card's influence dispelled. Izuku and Kero watched as the water swept away the trash, pulling it back into Tokyo Bay. The two sighed, the day's events heavy on their minds even with the sun still high in the sky. Izuku and Kero, walking away from Takoba Beach Park like a funeral procession, are headed home. In Izuku's words, "Today has been so unreasonably mean to me, I need a snack." Indeed, the day had been mean, and Kero wholeheartedly agreed on the snack. As they are walking, they get on the topic of cards again, because that is the main source of their headache. "So I now have almost all the cards that we actually know about," the greenette says. Windy, watery, fiery, wood, fly, and voice, and that's 3 of the 6 strongest cards right there. He paused to think, still keeping pace. "Actually, I thought they'd be harder to beat? I mean, you did say that they command the others, so what gives?" Kero thought about it for a moment. "I'd say it's the quirks," was his answer. Izuku gave a question in the form of a hum, to which Kero responded. "Well, you started with windy, so that's a given, but with fiery, I'd say they were fighting for control with that Endeavor guy. Factor in the fact that wood wasn't letting fiery burn her branches, and then you have a seemingly easy fight." "Okay, but that doesn't say anything about watery though," Izuku chimed. "I mean, she was in the ocean. How much water does she need to have in order to be as strong as you said?" "Watery was powerful," Kero's sweat dropped. "You just had windy and fiery to literally cut her off from her supply. Also, wood against watery is immensely strong." "Yeah, okay." And so they walked in silence for a spell. They passed one particularly grabby child, and Izuku was about to fight a kid he was so done with the day. After that particular encounter, he piped up again. "You said once that whenever the cards are near, we can sense them?" Kero nodded. "So then why haven't we? I mean, as far as I know, we're the only magicians in this prefecture, so what gives? If you weren't looking out for it, we would have never known Watery was even there." "That's dash," Kero began, then faltered, because he'd been thinking the same thing actually. "I actually don't have an answer for that one. Whenever I search for a card with my senses, I'm left with the feeling of a blanket being put over my head." "Do you think someone is messing with us?" Izuku asked worriedly. The implications of that were not good. Kero shook his head, flying to be in front of Izuku as the pair stopped on the side of the path. "It's more like something else with magical power is too close, making me only focus on that. The only problem is, I don't know what it is, let alone stop it." The lion plush sighed, but Izuku began thinking. "You say it's like a larger magical force is blocking you?" It was rhetorical, but Kero nodded anyway. "Well," Izuku mused, "what if that magical force was me?" Kero gave the green-haired boy an incredulous glance. "No way. It's a possibility." "Sure, if you didn't account for the fact that I've been able to sense your magic from the start," he said. "Trust me, if it was you, I'd know." With the finality of Kero's statement, the two restarted their trek to the Midoriya apartment. A few blocks down the road they saw a car wash fundraiser for a local youth program. It honestly wasn't much more than a group of middle schoolers with buckets of soapy water, but a movement caught a certain green boy's eye. "Hey, Kero." "Yeah, what's up?" Izuku pointed to the oddly moving pile of bubbles by the fundraiser. "There wouldn't happen to be a card that has to do with washing or bubbles, right?" Kero nodded absently as he watched the pile of bubbles help the kids clean the recently arrived car. Izuku's sweat dropped. Clow Reed needed a card for bubbles? Seriously? A paw made its way to the back of Kero's head. Well, actually, the bubbles was made, specifically, to give me a bath, but wasn't actually meant to be a card in the first place. It was an accident. Kero laughed in his own embarrassment as Izuku gave him a side-eye. Whatever, the boy sighed, already pulling out the key and summoning the staff. In a flash of light, Izuku was pointing the ceiling staff's star at the unsuspecting pile of bubbles. Just get over here, he said, half serious and half too tired to care, please. In a moment of the universe finally being nice to Midoriya Izuku on this odd September Sunday, the bubbles actually listened, forming a card without fuss and landing neatly in the boy's hand. God, I hope we can actually make it home before anything else happens. Yeah. I'm exhausted. Inko is at home, happily preparing dinner when her phone begins to ring beside her. Oh, Izuku's calling? She says to herself. I wonder what's the matter. She quickly dries her hands, reaching for the phone as she prepares herself for the rant her son will have about missing heroes or something of the like. Maybe he saw another kitten by the beach again. A smile pulls her lips and she's answering the call with a hint of laughter in her voice. Yes, Izuku? She begins. Did you miss getting Kamui Wood's autograph again? The other end of the line is quiet, but the sounds of people are carrying through. Izuku, honey? Midoriya-san? And that's not her son, but his companion, Kero. What happened? Is her boy all right? Does she need to run to the police station again? Or maybe this time it's the hospital. I can hear you panicking from here. Kero's voice cuts through the worry that Inko had gotten herself into, bringing her back to this moment. Sorry. But, Izuku, is he okay? Why isn't he on the phone? Is he hurt? Oh, there's the panic again. Don't worry, Midoriya-san, Izuku is fine. Why do I hear a but in there somewhere? Well, Kero trails off, clearly not wanting to actually say why he'd called instead of Izuku. Karabaros, Inko says in her no-nonsense tone. It always got Izuku to understand that going out at night isn't something a middle schooler should do to look for heroes. What's the matter? Izuku. He may or may not be currently passed out. Inko stayed quiet, so Kero continued. His quirk decided to act up again twice, and so he might have overdone it? I think the term is quirk exhaustion. Anyway, I need your help getting him home because I don't think people take too kindly to middle schoolers collapsed in the middle of the sidewalk. Inko was quiet. Not her I'm so angry I can't speak quiet, and neither is it her I'm going into shock because of what Nis said quiet. No, it was her rare and powerful I'm not sure whether I should be impressed or disappointed right now quiet. Eventually, she gets her thoughts together enough to speak again. She decided to be disappointed to the point of fondness of her little boy. Even if he wasn't awake to hear it, she switched between ranting about his impulsiveness and how she hoped he'd never change. To say Kero was left out of the rant was not true, and the drive to their apartment was plenty full of apologies. Welcome back, Izuku-kun. Izuku waved to Miki-san as he walked in the pet rescue. Hey, Miki-senpai. How was your weekend? Kero floated behind him as he pulled on his work apron. While he'd been upset at the prospect of having to miss out on hero watching, being with animals was just as fulfilling. Currently, it was his second week of being grounded, but he's managed, plus, the animals like Kero, so that's a bonus. It was great. My little Hideoten has just started to form sentences. The older man gushed. It was so amazing when he told me he loved me, bigger than cheese. Miki-san was divorced, amicably, 3 years ago and has weekends and winters with his kid, Miki-chan. Constantly the man talks about his kid, so much so that he's been asking Izuku for advice on parenting. I'm sure it was great, Izuku laughs, but I still have to work. So, the two turn to each other, green eyes meeting pure black ones. What do we need today? Well, we just got 2 new abandoned pets yesterday, so we need to check up on them. The dog kennels need to be cleaned out and then a few need a bath, specifically Emi, Aki, and Itsuki. Izuku nodded, already grabbing the cleaning supplies and protective coverings. Then we just have the usual, food, water, and play. A couple of hours later brings Izuku and Kero to the newly abandoned pets, Mickey-san standing beside him. These are them. The greenette motioned to the two kennels beside one another, each holding a cowering animal. Yeah, Mickey-san nodded. The one on the left is a rabbit and the one on the right is a Somali cat, and, get this, both are named Sakura. Izuku gave an incredulous look to his senior, who laughed at his reaction. I know, it's funny. Also, we think they belong to the same household because they both have the same pet-safe star earrings. Kero perked up a bit at the mention of the earrings, something that Izuku did not miss. With nothing more than a simple instruction to not let them loose, Mickey-san left the two alone to feed the rest of the animals. As soon as the door that separated the animals and the store, the two magic users turned to one another. I think these are the jump and dash cards, Kero started off with, not even giving Izuku time to ask. Named Sakura, and star earrings on pets? Rabbit and cat? Has got to be them. Okay, but anybody can name their pets Sakura and give them earrings. It's the Quirk era, stranger things have happened. Look at your cards. And he does, pulling a few from the holster that he'd bought on Sunday. See the star earrings? All of the ones you have except Windy and Fly have them. It's a sign of their place in the Sakura cards. Indeed, the mentioned cards did have star-shaped earrings. That's a compelling argument, but how are we supposed to capture them? The green-haired boy pointed to the two cages holding the respective cards. We can't exactly seal them now, Mickey and the other employees would know and we'd get in trouble. Kero sighed, knowing he was right. Eventually, they began their job, because they were still on the clock, so they were busy filling the food and water supplies for each of the different kennels. Occasionally they would have the opportunity to bring a few animals out, playing with them for a little while before having them put away again. Izuku had just closed the cage for Mikon when Kero flew into his face. You can just take them. What did I say about them going missing? Izuku deadpanned. No, I mean you can just adopt them. You can get all the paperwork and stuff signed, and then when we get home you seal them up. Kero said excitedly. That way, you get the cards and you don't get in trouble. It's a win-win. The greenette hummed in thought, truly thinking it over. If they could get away with it, then it'd be perfect. The only problem was, I don't have the money, and Mom would make me pay since they'd be my responsibility. The reminder, Kero visibly dimmed his excitement. Ah, right. It was the next day, Tuesday, and while that was not really significant to anybody but the students in the archery club, it was to Izuku. It was the 2-week mark of him finding Kero and the Sakura cards, and also the second day of knowing where Dash and Jump are. Maybe I can seal them and then say they escaped? Izuku thought to himself. He was currently walking towards the pet rescue, so this was important to think about. I mean, it wouldn't be the first time an animal has run away, but I'd be lying. He's at a loss of what to do. Kero was at home playing a new video game that he'd learned about online. He started it last night and wanted to play it today, so he stayed. The greenette was slightly miffed at the Guardian because of this, but Kero needed to have fun too, so if only he hadn't done it when he needed advice. Afternoon, Ito-senpai. Izuku greeted his coworker for the day. Ito-senpai was a college sophomore, working towards his bachelor's degree in veterinary service, and was actually only 3 years Izuku's senior. Hey, Izuku-kun. How was school? Ito said, his red eyes scanning him for any distress. That was his quirk, a passive field of empathy, but works better on animals, so he calls it animal whisperer. It's silly, but so is he. He must have found something to set him off because suddenly he's looking concerned. It was okay, Izuku says, trying to assuage the elder's fears. I just have something on my mind since yesterday. Sorry if it's distracting, but I promise I'm good. The greenette smiles, putting on his workplace apron, already grabbing the broom for the kennels. All right, Ito says reluctantly. Just know that I might be able to help if you need me to. Izuku nods and begins his work. Izuku sighs tiredly as he flops onto his bed. I just don't know what to do about them, Kero. He turns his head so that he's facing the Guardian. Kero's still playing that game, furiously spamming buttons on the controller as his character attacked a monster. How are we supposed to get Dash and Jump out of there? I don't want a random person to be attacked by them should they unknowingly adopt the cards. Kero didn't reply, too busy controlling his character. I mean, we could steal them he used air quotes, but I would feel guilty. And adopting them is out of the picture because I'd have to pay, and them disappearing would be a red flag for my mom. He sighed again while Kero cried out in victory over the game. Kero finally paused after Izuku's third sigh, turning to find the boy trying to merge with the mattress. Alright, give me a second. The lion plush quickly saved his game, flying over to the bed where his charge lay, depressed. So the problem is getting them, right? Yeah, but also in keeping the fact that their card's a secret. Well, Kero began slowly, what if you don't keep it a secret? Izuku looked at the plush incredulously. You were the one saying magic like the cards are to be under wraps. Now you want me to tell everyone? Kero's sweat dropped. You're right, I did say that, but what if we told them it was another part of your quirk? Like, say, what if all aspects of the quirk were sentient to a point? Izuku raised a brow. Like, I'm sentient, and the cards themselves are, so what if we told them that they tested you? The last part was said like a question, even though it was supposed to be a statement. You mean like I have to pass a challenge set by the card before I can use it? Kero nodded frantically, glad that the boy got it so quickly. I guess it could work. It would explain how the cards suddenly appear once I've beaten the challenge, and also explain why my quirk keeps acting up. Yeah, that could be good. Izuku's smiling at that point, nearly getting up from the bed before he frowns. But that wouldn't explain why my quirk is in the kennels. The greenette flops back onto the mattress, nearly sending Kero to the floor with the force. I've got it! Kero yells suddenly. The two Midoriyas stared at him from their places at the dining table, Izuku nearly dropping his sushi in surprise. Inko, bless her heart, takes the outburst in stride. What did you figure out, Kero? A part of your game? No, I've figured a way to explain why Izuku's quirk is in a cage. Two pairs of green eyes stare at the flying lion plush. One confused and fearful, and the other completely done. Did you have to shout that out loud during dinner? The greenette gives Kero a side glance. The two were walking from school to the pet rescue. It's Wednesday now and Kero had finalized the theory with Inko that night, fleshing out the story even if his mother didn't realize just what she was helping with. Kero raised a paw to his head in embarrassment. It was an accident. I was excited about finally figuring out the lie and it just slipped out. Izuku rolled his eyes, opening the door to the pet rescue and finding Ito-senpai again. Kero flew to grab Izuku's apron for him as the greenette followed. Hey there, Kero. Izuku, Ito greeted. Kero grunted his greeting as his mouth was full of apron. Izuku smiled and gave a brief wave. Afternoon, Ito-senpai. Izuku relieved Kero of his apron transport duty, pulling on and tying it behind him. Something about his mood must have alerted Ito's quirk because the older man was grinning at him. I see you figured out your problem? Hopefully it wasn't too difficult. Yeah. In the end, it was all just right there in front of me. Most of the time that's how it goes. Right? Izuku agrees. Now, Ito-senpai, tell me the rabbit and cat Sakuras, they haven't been adopted or claimed, right? No. It's actually policy to keep them for 2 weeks after finding them in order to reacclimate them. Also, it helps in the process of being between families, Ito replied. Then he gave Izuku a confused look. Why'd you need to know? Izuku gave his senior a big smile, matching Kero's beside him. Because those aren't pets, but my quirk. Kero laughed at Ito's expression, but Izuku quickly shushed him. No, really. Kero was explaining it more last night because I felt a pull towards them since Monday. Then, as we got to it we realized that they were physical manifestations of my abilities. Ito nodded, slowly gaining back control over his facial expression. Why would they have been found outside rather than with you? Wouldn't that make more sense? Kero took over. The cards that Izuku has are sentient to a degree and they don't like to be used until he's passed a challenge of theirs. These two were likely hiding but were brought in by you guys, and since we've found them Izuku can gain the cards. Ito looked a little bit more confused at that part and looked to Izuku for clarification. It's a specialty quirk thing, I guess. That brought Ito out of his stupor, giving a nod to the green-haired boy and his lion plush companion. So, how do you gain the cards? Ito asks, putting air quotes around the two words. I can't believe it actually working since you, technically, were not the one to find them. The three all began a walk to the cages holding the jump and the dash, Ito wanting to see it go down. All I have to do is use my quirk and then they're mine. It's a little extra, even by quirk standards, but it's what I have to do. And their challenge wasn't actually hide and seek, but more like hide and seek tag, if that makes any more sense. Yeah, it does. They entered the room with jump and Ito gave a glance to the room lined with cages and animals. We don't have to worry about the animals' safety, right? Izuku moved to the specific cages and found the two cards staring at him patiently. Very different from their curled-up positions from the past 2 days. No, it should be good. My quirk isn't inherently destructive, but if your quirk tells you that the others are distressed or uncomfortable, I can stop to relocate a few. The greenette turned to his coworker and found him nodding in agreement. Pulling out the star key, Izuku summoned the staff in a flash of soft, golden light. Kero snickered at Ito's reactionary gasp, but other than that he said nothing. Good, none of the animals panicked from the light. Hopefully, they don't freak when the ribbons appear, he thought, pointing the end of the staff at the two caged cards. Now that he's actually getting a good look at them, Izuku has to wonder how anybody thought they were normal pets. The jump was a pink rabbit with a golden star on the crown of its head, certainly not normal. The dash was a light purple with darker fur at its paws, tail tip, and the ends of its ears. They also both had star-shaped earrings. Yeah, definitely not normal animal markings, but whatever. Return to your form confined. Sakura card. With the same golden light, the magic circle appeared on the ground. Izuku glanced at his senior to find him gaping. Soon the rectangles appeared and the ribbons trailing from jump and dash into their respective cards. Much quicker than expected, the two cards were formed and floated into Izuku's hand as the magic circle disappeared. That was cool. Izuku and Kero giggled at the older man's reaction to magic disguised as a quirk. Yeah, it probably was, huh? So jump and dash. They let me do exactly what they're named for, yeah. Kero nodded, mouth full of his lunch. The two were sitting beneath a tree on school grounds, eating lunch near other students for the first time in a decade for Izuku. Not much different from sitting alone, but somehow it feels nice. He took another bite of his rice ball as he watched his schoolmates interact with one another. On the opposite end of the field were Katsuki and his small group. They'd agreed beforehand that they'd separate themselves just to keep the rest of the school sane. It's a little bit petty, but Izuku also would like something that resembled an apology from the boy before they got back to talking. Not just for the past decade, but also for what he'd subjected him to that weekend, just leaving him to the hands of the police and Endeavor. The nerve. Yeah, but like Dash says, it's not meant for long distances, so don't expect anything over 400 meters or longer than 5 minutes. And jump? Yeah, that one's weird and will let you jump over Tokyo Tower if you want it. Izuku almost choked at Kero's nonchalant mention of Jump's abilities. He pounded a fist to his chest in order to get his breathing under control. You're serious? Kero nodded, taking another bite into his Tamagotchi. Whoa, he trailed off, thinking about actually jumping over Tokyo Tower. If he remembered correctly, that's at least 333 meters. He continued to think over Jump and Dash's abilities when an announcement was played over the intercom system. Tomorrow, the archery club will be traveling to Kobayashi Middle School in Mabera in order to participate in a friendly competition between schools. All students wishing to attend must turn in their permission slips by homeroom tomorrow. A reminder that, as well as the competition, there will be activities for anyone to participate as a way into the archery club. Thank you, that is all. I kinda forgot that was happening tomorrow, Izuku said absently. I guess I've been too worried about Dash and Jump to pay attention. He turned to his companion, eyeing his empty bento. Kero, would you want to go? It's a free pass to skip classes for a day. Kero hummed, tilting his head in a show of thinking it over. Yeah, sure, why the heck not? It's not like I'm the one who needs the classes anyway. I don't know, those history classes are proving to be quite useful for you. Whatever. How'd you convince your mom to let you go the night before the trip? I thought your mom was all about you being safe and doing well in school, not signing permission slips 12 hours before the trip happens. Kero was sitting on his bag, which was on his knees. They were currently in the boarding phase, waiting for the rest of the students to finish boarding the bus the school had acquired for the drive, seeing as it would add a half hour to use the trains. Also, losing children in foot traffic is not a good thing either. Well, Izuku said, it has to do with the fact that she approves of anything academic, and she's always pushing for me to join an after-school club. So, since the trip is potentially both, she jumped for it. Kero hummed at the explanation, going silent as the teachers announced they were leaving now. No one took the spot next to me, Izuku thought. He looked around and found that most everyone was to themselves. At least it wasn't because of me this time. As the drive started in earnest, Izuku pulled out the Kero-specific headphones and MP3 player for the lion plush to use, grabbing his own in the process. Whoa, look at that field. It's called an archery range, Takemita-kun. Izuku suppressed a snicker at the first year's antics. It's still quite odd that he's able to do that without reparations, but he's getting used to it. I wonder how long until it starts? Kero's question was immediately answered by the archery club director, Sato-sensei. You have 20 minutes to look around and interact with the students at Kobayashi and the booths before the main event begins. Afterwards, you will have an hour to participate in the various events set up on the grounds. A small cheer came from the 30-odd students from Arudara, excited for their newfound freedom. At least half had come just to leave classes, Izuku knew, so only 15 or so were actually there to pay attention. 10 minutes later found Izuku and Kero absent-mindedly wandering around the different booths. They'd spent 5 watching part of a video presentation about the art of archery, and the other 5 getting lost in his head. Okay, perhaps not lost, but definitely not really fully there. Izuku, let's go to that one. Kero's excited call brought Izuku back to the forefront, walking towards the small range set up against a board for loose arrows. It had room for 1 target and was likely 10 meters long. Not much for a range, but for untrained kids and newly joined members it was probably great. I can set you up in just a second if you mind waiting? The booth runner asked. Nodding, Izuku set himself up to watch the participant. A girl with a rather interesting haircut and outfit was currently firing the bow with ease, managing A.9 or 10 per arrow, or so the sign beside the range said. She's pretty good, Kero. He looked at his floating partner. Why'd you want me to do this one? The flying lion plush got close, hovering by his ear. Because that's a card, the arrow if I'm right. Kero was probably right, as the girl the arrow fired and managed to shatter the aluminium like the sign said arrow as it impaled one already in the target. Yeah, he was right. So, how do you suppose we get her to come with us? I don't know. Thanks. In the end, they didn't figure it out, even as they followed the arrow to different booths and participated. The main event was called and everyone gathered in the stands that surrounded the range. Izuku wasn't really an archery buff, so it mostly passed by with his mind elsewhere. That isn't to say he didn't appreciate the work the participants put in. He also cheered for his classmates, so that didn't make the event any more time-consuming. Finally, the placements were announced and they were released to the booths and events once more, but this time having more opportunities to look around. Right now the 2 magic users were following Arrow around the event, watching her compete against amateurs and club members alike. She wasn't the best in everything, only really excelling in a straight competition, but in the trick shot events, she faltered. Magic or not, the Arrow was skilled but had her flaws. Any ideas? Kero asks, watching Arrow enter another small event. She's good, and I don't think you have to best her in skill. Kero trailed off, muttering to himself. I just wish I could remember how Sakura originally caught the card. Izuku gave his companion a look, seeing him wilt at the memory, or the lack of one at least. It's fine that you can't remember, Izuku said candidly. Honestly, if I had you telling me how Sakura caught the cards in the past, I'd think it unfair to the cards. The green-haired boy gave his companion a smile, one that was reciprocated. Besides, he continued, I quite like the challenge that each card poses. Makes me feel like I'm getting real-life experience against villains. The two watched as Arrow got second place in the event, calmly walking away. The magic users followed her still. I wonder if she'd come with us if we used her to compete. It was a stray thought that had just appeared in his mind. The wood ended up coming without much fuss, and the bubbles came willingly without even needing the staff's magic. Izuku thought about the scenario as he continued to follow the lavender-haired card. She probably wants her power to be used to its fullest ability. Maybe she can't do it on her own? What? Oh right, Kero had heard his question. I just thought that she might like being used? He gave a nervous look to Kero. I mean, she's only entering the events and booths that have a competitive aspect to them, so maybe she wants to continue? Kero moved a paw to sit below his chin. The arrow is one of the more competitive cards. Kero continued to think as they moved. Izuku thought Kero might discard the idea but was surprised when the lion plush said, I think it'll work. Minds made, the two moved to approach the arrow. She was just approaching another booth, and if Izuku was remembering correctly, the final competition, as the whole thing ended in 10 minutes. Gaining the card's attention, Izuku and Kero got her to stop, and also summon her bow. Yikes. Hey! Izuku's sweat dropped at the weapon aimed at him. I was actually hoping to talk? He rubbed the back of his head when the arrow squinted her eyes, getting Kero to hide behind the boy. Oh. I was just thinking that you really liked competing and shooting, so maybe, if you let yourself be caught, I could use you to join the archery club at school? Once again, his persuasion skills needed polishing, but at least the card was considering the offer and not just attacking. Seeing her lingering hesitation, Izuku continued. What I mean is, my mom wants me to join a club to make friends and whatnot, and if you help me I could do that. And then, since I'd be using you to practice and stuff, you'd be participating as well? It was a tense few seconds where the arrow drew back her drawstring a little further, an arrow appearing. The greenette didn't dare move a muscle, a sentiment that Kero seemed to share seeing as he hid inside his school bag. Finally, after what felt like an eternity to the novice Cardcaptor, the arrow dematerialized her bow, dropping her arms to her sides as she nodded in agreement. Oh thank God! Izuku let out a sigh, a hand reaching his chest in relief. I honestly thought I was going to get shot. Without further hesitation the staff was summoned, the arrow was captured, and Izuku now had a new card in his possession. Attention all in attendance. The Orudra Kobayashi archery introduction will be ending in 10 minutes. As a final reminder, any final participants for the novice archery competition, please make your way to the tall, blue tent. The novice competition is for any willing to participate, so make sure to sign up. The announcement startled Izuku a bit, as did Kero flying out of his bag. You got the card. Now, all we have to do is get home and we're all good to go. The plush lion's smile was bright and infectious. Izuku found himself joining in as he looked back at the card. Not just yet, the Cardcaptor said. There's still something I need to do. Oh. Midoriya-kun, I never knew you were such a natural with a bow. Yoshida-chan's surprise was mirrored by most of his classmates. For the final event, Izuku had joined, using the arrow to give him skills with a bow. Kero said it wasn't how the card was meant to be used, but it worked, didn't it? Now, as they were loading up the bus to start the drive back to Orudra, he was getting addressed by his schoolmates, all because he got first place in the novice competition. Well, Izuku rubbed the back of his head in embarrassment. I guess it's just a hidden talent, huh? Come along, kids, Sato-sensei interrupted, corralling them all onto the bus. You can ask Midoriya-kun all you want on the bus and back at the school. We still have an hour and 15 minutes before we arrive back after all. The students conceded, climbing in the vehicle. As Izuku was about to follow suit, he was stopped by Sato-sensei. I do hope you consider joining, Midoriya-kun. The skill you have is impressive. She let go and Izuku made it back to his seat. The whole of the drive was spent with Izuku fending off curious questions from his classmates. There was nothing he could really tell them besides, Kero convinced me to try for the fun of it. I've never held a bow before in my life. In his bag, the arrow was sitting contentedly in the Sakura book. She was happy that someone would finally use her more than once. Izuku, you're not going to have time for a shower if you don't wake up now. Inko's call came directly from the kitchen, rousing the sleeping teen from his dreams. They weren't anything spectacular, only fleeting visions of playing with Katsuki again, going to a hero school, and his father. Yeah, the dreams weren't anything amazing. I'll be out in a few, Izuku mumbled tiredly. No one really paid him any mind as he grabbed his extra uniform, pulling it along into the bathroom. It's a known fact that teens are moody in the morning as well as everyone else, so Inko and Kero just continued getting themselves food for the morning. Inko chuckles at her son's various groans coming from behind the bathroom door, likely dropping his things in a blind grab. "Oh Izuku, you silly boy," she mutters fondly. The golden guardian of the seal flitted through the air towards the couch as he munched on a granola bar. "Well," Kero says through a mouthful of food, "let's see what's happening today." He turns on the TV, already set to the news for the morning. "Morning Muzutafu. Azuma-san and I are here to bring you the morning news, letting you know how your day is going to start. Yes, and what a lovely day it's going to be. Haga-san, with a high of 25 and a low of 17, today is looking to be your average almost fall day. Right now, we have a bit of cloud cover, but by 7:30 it should be clear skies with a bit of a breeze. Around noon we expect to reach our high with, I'm sorry, but I seem to be getting reports of a growing cold front coming in quickly from the south. The approaching cold front is expected to reach our recently brought on warm front within minutes. Citizens of Muzutafu, I'm sorry to say, but it seems that our nice and sunny day has just been replaced with a freak fall storm." "Oh, that's no good," Inko says, frowning at the new reports of the storm. Already the two could see the rain beginning to fall heavily, hitting the windows and drowning out the sounds of morning traffic. Inko frowned at the heavy rainfall, then looked to the bathroom door. "Izuku's not going to like this at all." Kero tilted his head to the side in confusion. Why wouldn't Izuku like the rain? I mean, I get it, rain isn't fun, but it's not that bad. "Oh, well," the concerned mother bit her lip in worry. "It's just after an accident when he was 5, Izuku's never really been fond of storms, or rain really, but the main problem is whenever the storms happen suddenly, like this one." The plush flew to be level with Inko's face. What happened to make Izuku hate rainstorms so bad? You'd think he'd be all about it, what with the whole science behind it and all dash. Kero made a generic gesture to the window, that. I guess it has to do with the fact that dash. The bathroom door opened slowly, steam flowing out around the freshly cleaned green-haired teen with messy, damp hair. Green met green and Inko's face fell, watching her son's eyes darken a little at the view beyond the living room window. The plump mother sighed as she motioned to the kitchen where a plate of pancakes and eggs sat on the counter. It's an unfortunate matchup, the weather and the meal, but she hadn't known, not the Izuku would ever blame her. "Make sure to take your heavy-duty umbrella," Inko said to her son. "I'll pull your rain boots and coat from the closet so you can leave right after you finish eating." Her son just nodded mutely, eating as fast as he could. It's unfortunate that it's not because of his fondness for the meal. Kero just looked on at the two Midoriyas, watching as they seemed to just barely dance around the elephant in the room. The guardian couldn't help but feel upset on his companion's behalf, if only he knew what for. Kero flew beside the green-haired teen, using the umbrella to keep dry. For the past 5 minutes, he continued to think about what Inko had almost said, but he just couldn't think of the cause of his normally cheerful friend's sudden change in mood. "So, what's with you and the rain?" Tactless, but effective if the slight glare he's gotten has anything to say about it. Green eyes faced forward once again, a quiet voice replying, "I don't know what you mean." Clearly a deflection, but Kero already knows something, so that's not going to work on the guardian beast. "Your mom told me it was something of an accident when you were 5? He's really pushing it right now with his prodding, but he wants to know, wants to understand so he can comfort the boy. "It's really nothing that crazy," Izuku said. "It's just, when I was 5, I was playing with my friends, right? So, we were in the woods and then a sudden storm started as we were playing a round of hide and seek. The two kept walking towards the school building that just appeared around the corner. I was a hider that round, but the others decided to collectively quit and run back home." Izuku took a deep breath. "Well, they forgot to let me know. and since I'm 5 and not really wanting to let myself be found, I stayed hidden. Predictably, the rain got worse, and I was scared by the loud thunder, so I sat inside a tree stump the whole time, just crying. Since then, he shrugged, I've just never really liked storms that much. And that's it. That's all Kero needed to know. He was a kid, got lost in the rain, and then made it home. That's enough reason to understand and offer some comfort. So why does he feel like something isn't quite right? Like something is wrong? Hey, Midoriya-kun. The boy looked up from his desk to see Yoshida-chan quickly making her way to him. Her blonde hair bounced lightly atop her head in curls. Her quirk was specialized elasticity in her hair, allowing it to be changed at will, so she always came to school with various styles. It made it quite easy to keep out of her face whenever she practiced. What can I do for you, Yoshida-chan? They were just let out of school, the beginning groups for clubs forming as others left quickly. She smiled at him and wow, can never really get used to not getting bullied, huh? Well, Sato-sensei sent out a message for all of the archery club members that we had to cancel due to the weather, but since you never told us if you'd join or not last Friday, she wanted me to let you know. At the reminder of the storm, Izuku's green eyes narrowed the tiniest bit at the window, then closed in a smile as he turned back to his classmate. Thank you, Yoshida-chan. I'll be sure to head towards the faculty office before leaving so I can actually join the club. Right. She nodded happily at the news. Well, I guess that I'll see you at our next meeting, which should be tomorrow if the weather gets better. She waved, leaving. See you, Midoriya-kun. Izuku quickly packed up his supplies and made his way to the third year's teacher's faculty office, dropping off the signed club forms, which Sato-sensei thanked him for. Continuing on his way, the greenette trudged through the torrential downpour, ignoring the way the water sloshed around his feet. A look to the sky brought a bit of wetness, but let green eyes scan the cloud formations above. All day it's just been rain, rain, and more rain, Izuku muttered. Normally it'd be a storm by now, so where's the dash? He gets cut off by a sudden clap of thunder, the sound vibrating through him. There it is. Hey, Izuku, Kero said, flying from his school bag, abandoning his dry haven. The greenette looked at his companion. This storm's not normal. They both took a moment to watch the clouds, stopping on the sidewalk. You're right, Kero, the teen replies, punctuated by another thunderclap, this one louder than the first. There's no lightning. The observation was accompanied by 2 more rumbles of thunder, but as he'd said, no lightning lit up the dark clouds despite how close they should have been. You don't think it could be a Sakura card, do you? The lion plush thought for a moment, trying to sense whether magic did have a part in this. Nothing. It is. But it's more than one, so be on your guard. Green hair bounced as the Cardcaptor nodded, summoning the ceiling staff in a flash of golden light. The two scanned their surroundings, weary of the cards that could have made the storm. Any idea which ones? Something like rain or maybe even thunder. Those two seem to be the most obvious out of everything. No, rain is too weak to do something this widespread. They're mainly a light drizzle, not this. But I think thunder could be a part of this. Kero trailed off, thinking again. Thunder, you said? The plush nodded absently and Izuku sighed. How are we supposed to trap sound? If it were rain, which there's a rain card? Then I'd just use watery, but you said it's stronger, so what's stronger than rain than dash? At once, both magic users exclaimed at the same time, storm. Right? Which means we have to find the center, otherwise we'll never dispel storm, it'll just keep reforming. Nodding, the two began their search. Reluctantly, the teenage magician closed his umbrella, flinching at the cold rain now hitting the back of his neck. Within seconds the two were soaked. Fly! With a beating of green wings, Izuku soared into the air, scanning his surroundings. All around were dense, dark clouds and dsng rain, leaving them with low visibility. Another crash of thunder sounded, leaving a slight ringing in their ears, but Izuku saw something odd. Hey Kero, the thunder card isn't just thunder, is it? The Golden Guardian didn't even get the change to answer as a streak of lightning just barely missed the two, their hair standing on end despite the water weighing them down. They continued to narrowly dodge the thunder's assault, each time crying out in alarm as it began to get closer on each pass. We can't keep this up much longer. The thunder touched down on the roof of a building, giving them a bit of a reprieve, one that Izuku took with pleasure. How do we get this card under control? The only offensive cards I have are windy, watery, fiery, and arrow. Well, maybe bubbles, too, but that's pushing it. The green net devolved into rapid-fire mutterings about Bubbles' offensive capabilities before Kero snapped him out of it. Izuku, focus. The green net blushed, nodding. I just remembered. You have to reveal Thunder's true form before you can capture it. Right, okay. The Cardcaptor pulled those 4 cards from his bag. He really needed a place to keep them, properly looking at them as Kero kept watch on the still crackling thunder on the rooftop. I'd say maybe using windy to bind thunder? But thunder isn't technically a physical thing that can be trapped. Good, because windy is useless against thunder anyway. Nice to know, Izuku said sarcastically in his slight panic. Okay, so windy's out, and so is fiery because it's raining, leaving us with watery and arrow. He'd just finished putting away the 2 unusable cards when Kero shouted, "It's coming back!" And it was, the amorphous bundle of lightning named Thunder, of all things. Now that he thought about it, came speeding towards them, a narrow dodge downwards, the only saving grace. Couldn't you have waited a few more minutes? I was close to a plan. The complaint was ignored, ultimately being replaced by a yelp as the teen continued his dodging. Okay, watery and arrow are my only options. Think. Green eyes darted around, looking for anything that might have what? I'm so stupid. Watery, command the rain and use it as daggers against thunder. The familiar golden light was replaced by the blue-silver form of Watery, her long hair and tail dissolving into the rain itself. As he commanded, all the raindrops that surrounded Thunder suddenly stopped in their descent. The Cardcaptor watched as the rain began to condense, forming into numerous small blades of water, each one aimed at Thunder. Faster than Izuku could blink, the blades shot forwards, hitting their mark as even more were formed and joined the fray. Thunder let out a roar that sounded like a mix of the crackling of electricity and the booming of thunder as it fell back to the ground. Job done. Watery reformed into a card, grabbed by Izuku before he dived down, meeting the writhing form of Thunder on the street. Now that's cool, Izuku muttered, in awe at the most literal Reiju standing before him. Thunder's body was a bright yellow, its fur or whatever approximation was crackling and sparking with electricity. The tail was surprisingly long, and as it swayed the end continued to detach and reform. It stood roughly the size of a minivan, Izuku's head only coming to its shoulder. Izuku, I know it's awesome, Kero said quickly, but don't you think you should be sealing it? At the reminder of the current situation, the Cardcaptor steadied his hand, pointing the staff at the Thunder. Return to the guys you were meant to be, Thunder. At the command, the magic circle appeared beneath Izuku, the shimmering rectangle and ribbons forming, wrapping Thunder. The wind picked up at Thunder's struggle, but eventually, the magic won out, sealing the beast within the card. Man, that was tough. Yeah, but we're still not done, Kero says anxiously. We still have to deal with Storm. Thankfully, Storm is more of a passive fighter, not like Thunder, who is a direct fighter. So we don't have to deal with Storm coming directly at us? Izuku asks, hopeful for a simple fight. Right. Izuku cheers at that but Storm would rather form tornadoes and hope we get caught in the mix. The green net visibly wilts, the high from catching Thunder rapidly disappearing. You have to stop getting my hopes up and just say everything at once. The lion plush laughed slightly, flying up higher. You said we should attack the center of Storm, right? That way it won't continue. Yeah, and I think I see it. Get up here and you will too. With a sigh, a flash, and a beating of wings, Izuku was beside Kero, looking over the Mizutofu area. In the distance, a small swirling of clouds could be seen, a funnel cloud forming. See, it really will form tornadoes just to get us? The 2 magic users flew fast towards the center of the storm. Reaching into his holder, Izuku pulled out 2 cards but stopped when Kero spoke. Don't bother trying to take out its clouds with windy or watery, you'll just be wasting your magic. which you're likely running low on after using watery on such a large scale. The greenette laughed awkwardly at the reminder of him passing out a week ago. Kero sighed. Your main focus should be to attack the center, so try going with arrow or thunder. Nodding, Izuku pulled out the thunder, throwing it out and activating it with the end of his staff. Thunder, strike the eye of the storm. A streak of lightning shot from the card, rapidly closing in on the clear middle of the forming tornado. The greenette knows its magic, and he knows that the cards will follow his commands, but he really doesn't see thunder hitting anything in that clear space. Of course, just when he thinks that thunder collides with something. A large discharge of electricity flashes before the form of a curly-haired, blue-gray elf-like girl appeared. The newly revealed storm's lower half is fused with clouds, STNG to be connected like fog. Got it. Now to seal that somehow. Storm waved an arm, causing a large gust of wind to blow the two back, nearly sending Izuku to the ground in surprise. Kero, can windy bind storm, or is it immune like thunder was? No, it's not. Kero's yell came from behind and below, where he'd been blown farther due to his smaller size. Just hurry up, I don't want to see a tornado in Muzutafu. Right. Dodging to the right because Storm has very obvious movements for their attacks, Izuku pulls out Windy. Bind the storm. The flash of light breaks to show Windy in all her ethereal glory, flying in circles around Storm. Windy's hair wound around Storm, trapping the struggling elven girl. Return to the guys you were meant to be, Storm. Hey, Mom. Izuku's voice was shaking, both from nerves and from tiredness. He didn't wait for his mother's reply before adding on, I need you to come pick me up from the police station. Again. Instantly Inko was putting on her shoes and grabbing a jacket. What happened this time? It was another Quirk accident. Sorta. Midoriya Izuku, what happened? Her tone was no nonsense and she could hear the flinch her son made from the other line. Well, turns out the storm was a card, and while I was sealing it a hero found me and brought me in for public Quirk usage. Inko gasped, locking the apartment behind her. It's not actually a problem, I've been cleared after I explained how my Quirk works, but the main issue is I'm about to pass out and I need to be signed out. The Midoriya mother let out a relieved sigh, then huffed at her son's knack for passing out after using his Quirk. I'll be there in a few 5 minutes tops. She started the car, already pulling out of the apartment complex's parking lot. There was no reply for a moment until Kero spoke up from the other line. Inko? Yeah, Izuku's out. Honestly, you're such a silly boy. The fondness in her tone and the way she tucked in her son, Inko clearly loved Izuku. She might have had a hard time getting him inside, what with him almost falling asleep on her multiple times, but as she watched her son sleep Inko was reminded just how much she loved him. Last time Izuku passed out he ended up getting 4 cards, the green-haired woman started. How many did he get today? She exited the room, closing the door as she followed her son's companion. Oh, 2, was Kero's eloquent reply. At Inko's raised brow he explained. Well, he didn't get 4 cards this time, but he used Fly a lot, and a very strong card, and another without making it his, so to speak. That makes sense. I'm just surprised he wasn't more upset at his Quirk for making such a heavy storm. It was an offhand comment, clearly not really meant to be said out loud. What's that supposed to mean? Well, remember the accident when he was 5? Kero nodded. Yeah, he was in the forest when a heavy storm came out of nowhere. Apparently, that wasn't the right thing to say because Inko sighed, shaking her head. What? Did I forget something? Oh no, Inko reassured the plush lion. It's just Dash. She paused for a second. Well, Izuku has been using that excuse for years now, so I was kind of upset that he wouldn't even tell you, his companion, what happened. In order to understand you have to know of Hisashi, his father. She got up, pulled a picture from the wall and set it before Kero. The picture was of a family, clearly the Midoriyas by the thinner Inko and small Izuku. Holding the youngest Midoriya was a man with curly black hair and freckles. His eyes were closed as he presumably laughed with his son, who was sitting on his shoulders. Inko smiled sadly at the photo, silently thanking Mitsuki for taking it. Hisashi worked as a consultant for various companies, constantly having to leave for a few weeks at a time in order to help with projects. Yearly, the companies would all have a conference in America, one that Hisashi would have to attend for the first 2 weeks of July. Wouldn't that mean he constantly missed Izuku's birthday? You'd think so, but every year he would get off with just enough time to fly back the night before, arriving in the early morning of Izuku's birthday. Inko wiped a hand over her face, showing just how much the memory affected her. On the night before Izuku's 5th birthday, a freak storm formed right off the coast. Hisashi's flight had been in the area at the time, and while it normally wouldn't be a problem, the storm was heavy in lightning and the plane was struck at least 6 times. Kero gasped loudly. Izuku and I were staying awake, waiting for Hisashi to come home while watching Hero News. Inko sniffled, grabbing a tissue to stop the beginnings of tears. It was 11:46 when the news came through, and when they finally released the names of the deceased, it was already the 15th, 10 minutes past midnight on Izuku's 5th birthday. Inko blew her nose, the noise seemingly too loud in the wake of the memory. Since it was on such an important date and by a strong, sudden storm, Izuku hasn't handled them very well. He used to get nightmares, and on his birthday we had to celebrate at Hisashi's grave, otherwise, he'd get sad because Dad wasn't there. That's awful. And, really, that's a terrible way to describe what happened, but there aren't any words for it either. That also sort of explains his reluctance to use fly in the beginning. Sorry, I didn't mean to cry so much, it's just... The two were so close, and then when Hisashi died, Izuku was devastated for the next month, clearly depressed at the loss of his father. She started tearing up again. Then he got his quirkless diagnoses in August, so it probably felt, to him, that everything bad happened in his life because of that storm. Kero lay in his bed, the star-patterned blanket pulled over him as he stared at the dark ceiling. Every once in a while his eyes would find themselves on Izuku, wondering just why he'd keep the truth a secret. The lion plush stiffened when the green-haired boy shifted in his bed. It was silent for a moment before Izuku scared Kero by speaking. "I know she told you," the boy sighed as Kero flinched slightly. With the rustling of fabric, Izuku sat up, leaning his head back against the wall. "It's fine, I don't really mind, it wasn't fair to lie anyway." They were quiet then. "So why did you?" "It's not accusatory or anything." Kero was just asking the prevalent question. "I guess when it happened, I took a month off school, and Katsuki was the only person I would let come by and cheer me up other than Mom. Within that month I got my diagnosis, and when I went back a rumor started that my dad, that he didn't really die, he just left his quirkless son for America." Izuku let out a small whine, covering his eyes tightly as if to prevent his tears from falling. He sniffled twice before starting again, and in that time Kero had landed on his knee. "It wouldn't have been a problem because I had Katsuki, my best friend. But then something changed that fall, and all of a sudden Katsuki was perpetuating the rumor right along with them. To make it worse, our elementary teachers didn't even try and stop Katsuki or the others, and then it escalated from the rumor to other things, and then eventually to full-on bullying in middle school." The greenette took a stuttered breath as Kero flew up and hugged his shoulder. "I would never have held your father's passing against you." A quiet "I know" came from the boy, and Kero hugged tighter. "What they did was wrong, and you were just trying to keep yourself safe, trying to not lose another friend." Izuku keened at the reassurance, crying out in grief for both his father long past and his lost friendships. "It's okay," Kero muttered softly. "It's okay." Time passed as the boy cried, slowly running out of tears until he passed out, holding Kero close throughout the night. Inko wiped her tears as she closed her bedroom door. Izuku's cries had woken her up, but when she heard the two talking, all she could do was listen and cry. Just like before, she was unable to really do anything to help. "Man, archery is so hard," complained Izuku. The green-haired boy was walking alongside Kero after his club let out. Thanks to last night's impromptu crying session, the greenette was back on his feet and as energetic as ever. Kero shrugged at the boy's comment. "Sure, but you have Arrow to do all the heavy lifting. Not everyone else can do that." Right, the young magician nodded, "but remember that I'm not using Arrow every time because I want to build my skills." He rolled his shoulder, trying to ease a small ache that formed from practice. Because you have it in your head that the magic will only build upon your pre-existing skills. The plush lion shook his head at that thought, already used to the theories and mutterings of Izuku whenever he wanted to test something with the cards. A memory of using wood to unsuccessfully grow a garden. The plots filled with bonsai trees would need watering tomorrow. You're just jealous that I'm right, doing something that you never thought of to do. The lion flinched at that, something that wasn't missed by the green-eyed boy. Anyway, it seems to be true, seeing as my aim, accuracy, and power all seem to be getting better if only observed for one day. Unless the magic is influencing your actions afterwards, improving your skill through some sort of feedback. The two passed through the supermarket's entryway, ignoring the stares from other shoppers. Or maybe, and hear me out because this is just crazy, but maybe you're getting better simply because you're better. Izuku scoffed, smiling at the banter. The two have been going on this topic ever since after practice, and each time something like this happens. Truthfully, the green-haired boy was just getting better because of the practice. One day's worth of lessons already helped, but the prospect that Arrow will become more powerful the better he actually is with a bow is too much to not test. The pair continued their argument as they shopped, pulling various ingredients from the shelves, mainly the ones that go into Katsudon, until paying and leaving. Of course, they made sure not to disturb the others around them, but it was fun. Now, the pair were perusing the aisles of a 100-yen shop. Izuku was looking for more notebooks and pencils, and despite the cheap price, these ones were his favorite. Finding a pink notebook that looked to have a compass design on its cover, Izuku compared it with the All Might notebook in his hand. "Hey Kero," he said. Kero, who was previously looking at pencil toppers, finds Izuku and the notebooks. "Which one do you think I should get?" He raised the pink one. "I know it's plain, but it reminds me of the cards dash." He raised the All Might one now, but ultimately I'm leaning more towards this one. "Having that guy's face over everything you own is a little weird, Izuku." Both magic users sweat dropped at the reminder of their shared bedroom. Kero opened his mouth to say more, before closing it again, a strange look on his face. Kero was silent for too long, so Izuku spoke up. "I mean, I know I like All Might, but that doesn't mean I won't get the one you like more, Kero." The lion plush continued to stare at the two books, not even replying to the teen. "Kero, Caraberos." "Huh." He blinked his eyes, coming out of whatever daze he'd fallen into. The greenette sighed, putting back the All Might notebook. "You don't have to give me the silent treatment just to get a point across, you know." "What?" "No, that notebook you're holding, you said it reminded you of the cards?" Izuku raised a brow in question, giving the book another look, humming in thought. "Yeah. The color scheme is roughly the same, plus it has stars in the corners." He smiled wide. "I thought I might be able to transfer everything I have in my other Sakura card notebook into this one, that way it fits the theme. Any thoughts?" "Dude, Izuku, that is a Sakura card." Izuku blinked once, twice, 3 times before his brain caught up with what his companion said. Really? What card is it, the notes or the book?" Kero shook his head at the comments. "No. It's the create, and anything written inside will be brought to life as long as you are awake." He points a paw in an accusatory manner to the green-haired boy, "So that means don't write just anything in there." A little quieter, he added, "Actually, I wonder if that story is still written inside." "I don't know what you mean by story, but I guess that means I get to seal it now, right? Since I'm holding it?" Kero nods, and Izuku proceeds. The only indication that the greenette now held a card rather than a book is a flash of golden light and a sigh of relief. As the two were leaving the store, a red bow and small star earring clasp caught Kero's eye. It was clear to the greenette that the lion plush was trying their best to not give in to the urge to buy it. Laughing lightly at his companion, Izuku puts him out of his misery, adding it to their basket, purchasing it. The two left the 100-yen store, Izuku pocketing a new card, and Kero wearing his newly acquired accessories. A smile was worn by both of them. "Hey, do you think any of the cards are still in their card form?" Izuku suddenly asked. He watched as Kero fiddled with his bow and earring clasp. "How do you mean?" Kero said, distracted. The ribbon was just not sitting correctly. Well, you know how Create was just sitting with the notebooks? Kero nodded. What if a few are still cards and they're sitting in a card shop or something? Maybe, Kero said, currently fighting with the ribbon. Just don't expect to find any so easily, but it's a possibility, yeah. At hearing Kero's confirmation, Izuku sighed in relief. Thank goodness, because I thought I was going crazy. The greenette stopped walking, turning to the store at their right. Illusion is just sitting there. Kero turned to see where Izuku was looking. Sitting on a card stand was the illusion card, all pretty and protected by the glass casing. You have the strangest luck, you know that, Izuku? The boy laughed, pushing open the storefront's door. Yeah, no need to tell me twice. Mom, you will never guess what we found today. Well, hello to you too. The plump woman smiled as her son excitedly put the groceries on the table, Kero helping unload. But what did you find? At her question, the boy pulled 2 cards from his holster, a well-thought-out purchase, brandishing them for her to see. More cards for your Quirk? Izuku nodded eagerly, smiling widely. Yeah. Kero and I were looking at notebooks when I found this one just sitting there. Inko laughed at the story, carefully stocking the fridge and cabinets with the shopping. And you'll never guess where we found Illusion. The mother hummed, placing the milk carton on the shelf. Where, honey? In a display case for the local board game store. Carabarros paused his game, turning around to face the newest Cardcaptor. The young magic user was fiddling with the lock on the Sakura book, staring at the wall even as he opened and closed the book, filling the room with faint, repetitive clicking sounds. The repetitive motion continued until Kero flew to the boy, placing a paw onto his hand. Izuku jolted slightly, looking down at his companion in surprise. Kero! Green eyes found their way to the paused game and the boy sighed. Do you need help again? It wasn't a distraction per se, but Izuku's mind wasn't fully in it, something that didn't go unnoticed by Kero. The plush shook his head. Nah, but I was wondering what's got you thinking so hard? Izuku ducked his head slightly. For the past 3 days, the greenette has been distant, always going into bouts of silence, staring at nothing. Something was bothering the boy, but neither Inko nor Kero knew what. Izuku's cheeks heated, and he knew that his freckles were standing out against the flush, which only made him blush harder. Well, I was just thinking about the cards I already have. A hand made its way to his head in embarrassment. You say they're sentient, so I was worried that. Gah, this is dumb. Kero frowned. What's dumb? I worry that the cards don't like me, the boy said quietly. I mean they might not like just sitting around, not being used like Arrow was. Like, maybe I'm not treating them right? Izuku let out a sigh, falling backwards onto his bed. I don't know. Kero watched his companion, feeling empathy for the boy. They sat there for a moment before the Golden Guardian perked up, walking to the discarded Sakura book on the bed beside them. I don't know why you're so concerned whether or not they like you, Kero began, fishing for information that will be purely beneficial. At his comment, Izuku flailed an arm to the side, grunting. I'm the Cardcaptor, he began, so I have to collect all the cards, but I also want to be a hero and help people. Without a quirk, my best chances are the cards, but if they don't even like me, how could I ever ask for their help? He takes a deep breath. How can I be a hero if all I use are cards that hate me? The 2 magic users sit in silence for a moment, one lamenting their circumstances and the other smiling happily. Well, Kero announced, flying above Izuku's face, I don't think you have to worry about that anytime soon. One by one, each of the 14 captured Sakura cards entered his field of vision, glowing with a soft golden light. Sitting up, Izuku smiled as the cards bobbed in the air in a way that was conveying happiness. The 14 cards rotated around his head, almost like they were each trying to tell him personally how much they enjoyed being with him. Without much warning, a bubbling laugh finds its way out of Izuku. The green-haired boy laughs as Fly, Dash and Thunder all seem to be vying for his attention, floating above one another to be present. So I guess I was afraid for nothing, huh? Izuku smiled at Kero. Thank you. Anytime. And Kero meant it. Anytime Izuku needed him, he'd be there. So what are we doing today? The lion plush hovered near Izuku's shoulder, looking at the circle the boy had drawn in the dirt before them. The pair were in Mizudafu, taking advantage of the various quirk parks that the city provided. Granted, they were under constant surveillance given the nature of quirks, villains and the public, so Izuku hoped that they weren't attacked by another card today. Pulling out the Sakura book from his school bag, Izuku opened it. I was wondering the limits to my magic with the cards. Grabbing the desired card, Izuku set the book down on top of the bag beside him. Summoning the staff, the green-haired boy held the two together. Come on out, Fly. The card began glowing before transforming into the ribbons that Izuku has gotten used to over the month. He watched as the magic seemed to condense into a vaguely crane-like shape before aborting and rushing behind the Cardcaptor. He groaned at the test's failure. I'm confused, Kero said. Isn't that what you wanted to happen? You summoned Fly. The lion plush continued to stare at the boy with confusion as he dismissed the wings which still throw him off at how they're green. I'm hoping to summon Fly's form, not the wings. Once again he held the two magical items together, willing it to work. Fly, come on out. The ribbons formed, Fly's body shaping together with greater definition. Izuku crossed his fingers that it worked until the bird dissolved and he felt the telltale feeling of feathers brushing against his shirt. Yeah, I don't know how successful you'll be with this. Kero shrugged, not looking at Izuku. The cards were made with specific effects in mind, but you're actively trying to switch that effect. The only time that happened was when Sakura changed the Clow cards into her own Sakura cards, making it so Sakura could use Fly and still have the staff. Kero ended his spiel with a shake to his head, already knowing Izuku would be disappointed at the news. Opening his eyes, rather than find a downtrodden Izuku with a pair of wings, he finds the greenette laughing as he holds onto the Fly in its bird form. What how? The Fly let out a chirping sound, happily flapping its wings in the greenette's arms. Izuku's sweat dropped. I tried another 2 times as you were talking before thinking, I want to play with Fly, you know, like I did the first night? Kero nodded slowly. Well then I just asked Fly to play because I remembered you saying you could use the card's name or even just give out instructions, so that meant that using a specific instruction like this one would work. The two magic users stared at each other for a second before Fly beat its wings again, clearly wanting attention. The Golden Guardian could only sigh and smile as he watched his newest Cardcaptor chase around the Fly, throwing the magic bird into the air upon capture. Okay. Izuku pumped his fist. The Fly mimicked him, raising its wing excitedly from atop his head. Kero snickered. Now for the next test. The greenette now stands with his hands on his hips, Fly copying him again. Reaching up, Fly jumps into Izuku's hands, allowing it to be carried to the ground. Fly, I want you to try and become my wings from here, okay? The blue crane-like bird chirped, beating its wings rapidly. Green eyes widened as Fly began to dissolve into ribbons of magic, wrapping around the green-haired boy like a hug before dissipating, leaving Izuku with a pair of green wings. Nice work, Izuku. Kero grinned at the blushing Cardcaptor, flying around his head like a compliment-giving angel. You're so smart to be able to do this. Your control over your magic is quite amazing. Look at how far you've grown in only a month. He continued to compliment the skill of the Cardcaptor, happy to see Izuku happy, and helping with his confidence. There is no doubt that Izuku's confidence issues were the problem with his doubt of card ownership. Chaos, stop, the greenette protested, and the lion plush acquiesced. Breathing a sigh of relief, Izuku dispelled Fly, trading its card for another. Kero grinned more when he saw Izuku pulling out the jump. Are you trying to manifest the animal form as you did with Fly, or are you just wanting to try it out? His grin grew wider at the greenette bashfully holding up 2 fingers. Sweet. Let's get to it. Nodding, the Cardcaptor brandished his staff. Jump. The card dissolved into ribbons, reforming around his ankles, forming 4 miniature green wings. Now to test out the height. Being careful not to move, he grabbed a notebook, pen and measuring tape from his bag. Setting the first 2 items on the ground, Izuku handed the measuring tape to his companion. What's this for? Kero asked, holding the tool. Izuku gave him an incredulous stare, to which he responded, I know what it's for, I meant, what am I doing with it? This is a measuring tape that goes 2 kilometers. It's specially made to observe quirks, and seeing as I don't know how high I can go, I went with this. He directed Kero to sit next to the notebook and pen. Kero sized, now that the lion plush looked. We need to decide a baseline, so record the number while I hold it at my shoulder. Then we go from there. Right, Kero nodded, but you do know that the magic in the card will react differently based on your intent, right? The greenette tilted his head in question. It won't always take you higher than Tokyo Tower, you'll jump as high as you want or need, never more. And never less. Izuku blinked. Oh, really? He looked at his little setup. That makes this so much easier, then. Now we can test the limits. He sweat dropped. I was going in blind, but with this information, I have something to look for. Kero shook his head at the Cardcaptor's antics. Your highest was 969 meters and 12 centimeters. That's crazy, Kero reports. His audience, Izuku, was currently collapsed on the ground, breathing heavily and beginning to feel the effects of overdrawing his magic. Yeah, but I feel I could go higher. Kero sputtered at the admission, taken aback at the thought of Izuku going a full kilometer into the air. What could possibly make you want to go higher? You nearly crashed into a building because of the wind. The Golden Guardian had a point. On his descent from his highest and last jump, the wind picked up, nearly sending him directly into the side of an apartment complex. Probably for the best they stopped for now. Despite all the evidence pointing to never going higher, Izuku shrugged. I dunno, just because I can? Kero groaned. Obviously not now, but probably at UA. Besides, we don't know if height translates into distance. I might be able to jump 3 times the height of the Abino Harukas building, but only 10 meters across the ground. Kero opened his mouth to protest, then closed it. The kid had a point, unfortunately, so they will have to test jump more at a later date. Likely UA, like he said. Fine, but we only tested at UA, got it? The greenette nodded, carefully picking himself off the ground. Now, let's get you home. I don't think the park observers like people passing out too much. Izuku, honey? Inko popped her head into her son's room. The 2 occupants turned to her, Izuku looking up from his book and Kero pausing his game. I have to go out for a bit, won't take longer than 30 minutes before dinner. I was hoping you wouldn't mind finishing the dishes while I'm gone. She gave a small, guilty smile. There's not a lot in the sink, but I'll need the few pots that are to prepare for dinner. Putting down his book, Izuku nodded. Yeah, he paused. Plus, I think it was my turn today anyway. He rubbed the back of his head at the admission. Inko waved him off. I didn't mind, and I know how hard you've been working with your quirk. A more, not smug per se, but conspiratorial grin formed, paired with a wink. This just means you get to clean all of tomorrow too. Right? Izuku sighed. He accompanied his mother to the door, waving her off. When the door finally closed, he wilted slightly, weighed down by the fact he has to clean tomorrow as well and that he'd left his mother to clean on her off day. Well, the boy says suddenly. He turns to Kero, smiling at the companion. The lion plush shudders at the reminder of his last time doing chores. Let's get those dishes done, and then tomorrow we do the house. Kero groaned. Are you not feeling well, Izuku? Inko was dressed in her hospital scrubs, almost ready to leave the apartment for the day when her son, who was usually so punctual at getting dressed early, walked into the kitchen with his atrocious t-shirt. You aren't sick, are you? Worried, she puts a hand to Izuku's forehead, checking his temperature. Izuku smiled at the concern but moved the hands away. No, there's just been a villain attack near the school. The damage was minimal, but since the villain had a seismic quirk, the school board closed for today to ensure no damage was done to the foundations. He grabbed his plate of omuris from the counter, turning back to his mom. You'll get the call soon. Indeed she did, not even a minute later. The message relayed the exact information that her son had just told her, but with a little more professionalism. And how did you know about this? The call said the attack happened after midnight. Inko gave her son a stare so she got to watch him jolt in fear. You may or may not have gone to bed late? Inko sighed, shaking her head. You've really got to stop doing that. She pointed a finger to her son, as she's done many times before. Going to school after not having a full night's sleep will only hinder you in your efforts to enter UA. Izuku ducks his head at the reminder, to which Inko smiles. So long as you keep your grades up and sleep well, I know you can do it. The younger Greenette nods and his mother leaves for her shift at Muzutafu General. Shoveling down the last bites of his breakfast, Izuku washes his plate in the sink, setting it to dry on the counter. From the hallway flies Kero, just now having woken up. Mornin', the lion plush yawns, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. Izuku smiles at the adorable form that was Kero just waking up. Here, he says, pulling Kero's portion of omuris from the microwave. Breakfast and then we clean. Somehow Kero managed to groan at the reminder, even as he stuffed his face. You don't have to help if you don't want to, Kero, but it will mean I can play with you for longer the sooner I'm done. He receives a glare from over a spoon, and the boy can't help but laugh at his companion. Over the next 3 hours, the two would clean the house. As Izuku cleaned the floors, Kero dusted the tops of shelves, nearly sending himself into a sneezing fit, something that Izuku found hilarious. The two continued to spend their day like this until lunchtime, which is how the two magic users found themselves in the kitchen. I'm stuffed, the lion plush said, splayed out on the counter just to prove his point. Izuku eyed Kero from the side as he put away the dishes. Oh, that's too bad, because Mom made a cake last night. He fake sighed. I guess I'll just have to eat it all myself. That got Kero up. The Greenette laughed at his companion's whining. You don't just play with someone's feelings like that, Izuku. Sorry, it was just too funny. His laughter continued even as he pulled the pre-made dessert from the fridge, careful not to drop it. Setting it on the counter, he turned to Kero. Hand me that knife? Sure, Kero said distractedly, no doubt already salivating over the sight of the strawberry shortcake. Palming the counter for the knife, Kero finally turned away when he didn't find anything. Izuku? The Greenette hummed. Where's the knife? Green eyes made their way to Kero and the counter. That's weird, he said. I know I just set it down. Izuku checked in the fruit baskets, in the sink, and even on the stove, but the knife wasn't anywhere. I'll just grab another. Mind grabbing some plates? The green-haired boy had just grabbed the handle of another knife when a crash sounded behind him, accompanied by a shout from Kero. Turning to the noise, Izuku found Kero staring at the empty counter, the dropped plates below him. What's wrong? Sprain a paw? He did a quick once-over, and in that time Kero responded. The cake's gone. Izuku, this is terrible. How could the universe do this to me? Izuku's sweat dropped at the emotional reaction that Kero had at the disappearance of their dessert. This has to be the work of a Sakura card. Nothing else would ever dare to be so cruel. That's a bit hasty, don't you think? The teen flinched as Kero flew right into his face, angry. This is just the amount of haste this situation needs. The golden plush turned the corner from the kitchen to the hallway, calling out, "Try and sense for the card. Your magic should be strong enough," as he did so. Izuku could only sigh when his companion came back. With the Sakura book in his paws, laying it on the counter. Doing as Kero asked, Izuku closes his eyes, reaching out with his magic, something that is still hard, even with the month of practice. Probably due to the blanket, as Kero called it. Reaching around the apartment, the Greenette felt something odd in the living room. Check the living room? He's uncertain, but Kero didn't care as he just charged in yelling about his dessert. Following the lion plush, the two magic users found nothing. I thought you said it'd be here? Izuku frowned. Summoning the ceiling staff, he gave the lion plush a small glare. I said to check, not that we'd find anything. Green eyes scanned the room to find nothing out of place. Trying to sense it again. That's odd, he says, gaining the calmer attention of Kero. What is it? You find the card? Yeah, he starts, only, it's still here, just above us. Green met black before turning to the ceiling. Izuku lets out a yelp in surprise at the sight of a floating strawberry shortcake merely half a meter above their heads. What? Kero, what card is this? And why the cake? It's gotta be the float. The lion plush flew to the magically flying dessert, reaching out to take it back, when a winged, purple and pink striped balloon, beach ball, appeared surrounding the cake itself. Capture the card, then we can have cake. Izuku rolled his eyes at his companion's one-track mind but complied with the order. Return to the guys you were meant to be, float card. With a flash of golden light, the float was transformed into its Sakura card, landing neatly in his outstretched hand. The face depicted the balloon of float attached to a winged basket like a hot air balloon in the sky. I didn't even have to fight. Isn't that great, Kero? He looked for his winged companion. Kero! A grunt from above caught his attention. A little help here? The teen found Kero doing his absolute best to keep the cake from falling, holding it up like Atlas. Except, unlike Atlas, Kero was sinking closer to the ground. A moment longer was spent just observing the strange sight when Kero called out again. Izuku! Please? Oh right. Sorry. The door opened and closed, leaving Inko Midoriya standing on the threshold of the apartment, staring at the nearly sparkling surfaces. Oh wow, she breathed. Izuku, Kero, you didn't have to do so much. She set her work bag on the table, marveling at how literally the floor, table, counters and even the windows sparkled in the setting sun's light. Oh hey Mom. Izuku was sitting on the couch, reading another book on quirk theory. It's either that or All Might biographies. The boy jumped in surprise when a pair of arms wrapped around his neck. Thank you. Of course, he said. Putting down the book, the younger Midoriya got up and hugged his mother properly. You needed the break. Inko gasped, nearly to tears at the sincerity. And because Kero only saved you one piece of the cake you made, Izuku said cheekily. Gasping for a different reason this time, Inko broke the hug, holding her son's shoulders. You're kidding? The boy shook his head. Kero? Where is he? Izuku grinned, pointing to the coffee table. On it were 5 small plates stacked, covered in crumbs but not spilling onto the table itself. Next to the plates was the sweet-toothed menace that was Karaberos, sleeping away as though he didn't just gain the ire of Inko. The short woman glared at the sleeping lion plush. You're lucky you're cute. Izuku laughed quietly, going into the kitchen and grabbing his mother's saved slice of cake. It's fine. We're making sweets next week in class surprisingly, so I'll give mine to you. The mother gave a pointed look at Kero. He gets no sweets until then, an appropriate punishment. Please, please, please? Kero begged. No, Izuku said, turning away from the winged beast. Ah, come on. Why not? The green-haired boy gave an incredulous stare to which Kero backed down. Point taken. But still. Izuku shook his head, continuing on his way to the archery club. He's gotten good if he says so himself. The answer is no, Kero. The greenette waved at the other students still in the school hallways, as though apologizing for Kero's behavior. You only saved my mom one piece of her own cake. I think it's safe to say you need to take a break for a while. The lion plush groaned as he floated along behind the Cardcaptor. Eventually, the two made their way to the small archery range that Urudara has, Izuku setting his things down on the bench. Pulling out the arrow, Izuku summoned his staff. Bring the bow, arrow. A flash of light that the archery club members have gotten used to by now later, and the greenette was holding his magic bow. Completely transforming the ceiling staff, the bow was both simplistic and elaborate in its design. At the ends where the drawstring was held by the limbs were wings, white in color. They seamlessly formed out of the green material that was the main body. The grip was crisscrossed by a tough red thread and surrounded by wings at the top and bottom. The drawstring itself was a deep red, matching the grip and the ornamental ribbon that was tied on the upper limb, just above where a red gem was embedded, mirroring the lower limb. Izuku sighed when he found Kero hovering sadly above his quiver, one of the only things he had to buy, alongside his arrows, wrist and finger guards. Kero, come on, it's only a week and then you can get back to eating sweets. The lion plush made no acknowledgement that he heard the boy, and so Izuku turned to where Sato-sensei was beginning her instruction. Kero, mind passing me my quiver? The green-haired teen whispered. They were due to begin in a minute, And having Kero grab it was always easier in the long run, even if it was just a few meters away. A small grunt came from behind, and Izuku took that to mean he was, and so he waited for the telltale feeling of something being set beside his legs. The time came for them to begin, and still, Kero wasn't back yet. "This better not be to get back at me, Kero," he said, turning around. As the other members of the club began to fire off their first arrows, Izuku was looking at Kero, who was seemingly looking for the item. "So, where'd you put it again?" The green-haired boy huffed. "It's right there," he said, pointing at empty space. "Wait, what?" The winged guardian flew to hover next to Izuku. "That's what I thought." Footsteps sounded behind Izuku and the boy tensed. "Midoriya-kun," Sato-sensei said. "Is something the matter?" She's not an angry teacher, and nor was she upset in any manner, but in Izuku's experiences, having any teacher say that isn't a good sign. Of course, things are different now, but still, learned behavior is hard to get rid of. "I know, Sato-sensei." The boy turned around quickly, tightening his grip on his bow. "I was just dash." "His quirk is acting up," Kero finished. "Nice save," the teen thought. Sato-sensei raised an eyebrow. "Oh, in what way?" Green eyes nervously found their way to Kero. Yesterday it floated things at home, and today it's misplacing his things." Never mind. That sounds so suspicious." "What was misplaced?" She took a look around the teen before sighing. "It was your quiver?" A nod from both magic users. "Of course, it just had to be the one thing you absolutely need to practice. I'll look on the other side, see if it's there, while I suggest you look around here." "Sato-sensei, you're so nice." They nodded and then set off. With the sounds of arrows sinking into targets and the twang of drawstrings being released, Kero and Izuku looked around the area, sometimes getting weird looks from others. Once they checked the whole of their side, Sato-sensei came back. "Here it is," she said, holding out the black quiver with an embroidered Midoriya Izuku down the side. "I just have no idea how it got to the first year's area." She shook her head. "It doesn't matter, just make sure to keep a hold of your quirk next time, okay?" Izuku nodded rapidly, reaching out for the offending item. If only his hand made contact. In a flash, a pair of pink-red wings sprouted on the quiver, flapping once, and then the whole object disappeared. The trio blinked at the now empty space between Izuku and Sato-sensei. Sato-sensei broke the semi-silence first. "So that's your quirk acting up, huh?" The greenette sweat dropped at the deadpan comment. "Yeah." "Well," Kero spoke up, "we have to find it again, and this time deactivate your quirk, Izuku." He said it with a pointed glare, which is fair since it was quite obvious what had happened. "Sorry, Sato-sensei, I don't think I'll be able to practice today." The teacher waved him off. "That's fine. I understand a thing or two about specialty quirks, how they seem to be against the user." Izuku made sure to bow 3 times before grabbing his stuff and leaving, dispelling arrow in the process. "Where do we start looking first?" The two were walking through the hallways, searching the various classrooms as they tried to find the card. "Better yet, which card is it?" Kero hummed for a moment. "If I had to say, it'd be the move card. It's annoying in that it's mischievous and moves around things that you need." The Cardcaptor groaned. "The good news is it can't move bigger objects or living things either." Kero shrugged. "Honestly, I'm surprised it could move around your heavy quiver, what with it being filled to the brim with all those arrows. Mom just likes me being prepared is all. But it's good that we know what we're dealing with now. Any idea its distance limits?" "It can't go too far, probably 20 meters?" The greenette paused and groaned. "What? That means we've missed it. And now we have to go all the way back and look around the range again." They started to backtrack, Izuku grumbling the whole time while Kero sweat dropped at the reversal of their first trip to the range. "Maybe you should just sense the card this time," Izuku gasped loudly. "Why didn't I think of that?" Grumbling some more, the Cardcaptor reached out with his senses, willing his magic to find the move. "This blanket thing is really annoying. Makes finding Sakura cards so much harder than it needs to be. In fact, Kero or I would have sensed the card before this dash." He cut his train of thought off when he got out a reading, coming from the room on the right. "Here." Throwing open the classroom door found the two magic users staring at Izuku's quiver lying peacefully on the desk, as though it hadn't been sending the two of them on a wild goose chase for the last 10 minutes. Not wasting a single moment of time, Izuku raised his staff, pointing it at the quiver. Return to the guys you were meant to be, move card. Without even a chance to escape for a second time, the move's wings appeared, only to be executed into the card-shaped space at the edge of the magic circle under Izuku. When the magic died down, Izuku looked at the card he now held in his hand. Its face depicted a triangular basket holding a single star tied to two wings. It was very reminiscent of the float, which makes sense since they do similar things and have similar personalities. Well, Kero said, that was over quicker than I thought it would be. I just didn't want to have to chase it for any longer. Pulling a pencil from his bag, Izuku wrote his name beneath that of the card. And I don't want you to have the chance of doing this again, he told the card itself. Now, let's get back to the range. Izuku? Yeah. Kero pointed to the mounted clock. It's past time for it to have ended. Izuku's groan could be heard throughout the school, scaring the few students that were in the library.